topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me in the next hour, broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, and also former Labour Party advisor Matthew Laza. In a few moments' time, we'll be covering the latest on the hostage situation between Israel and Hamas, as more hostages are set to be released imminently. But before we do all that, let's get started. Let's get your latest news with Sophia.
Thank you, Nana. Good afternoon. It's 3 o'clock. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Hamas is due to release a group of hostages through the Rafah crossing today. Israel has received a list of 13 hostages who will be freed from captivity. Egyptian authorities are waiting for their arrival at the Rafah border crossing on the border with Gaza. Israel is also preparing to release 39 Palestinian prisoners in the second phase of the hostage deal. Meanwhile, Yoni Katz-Asher has been reunited with his wife, Doron Katz-Asher, and their two daughters, Raz and Aviv, after they spent the last 7 weeks in captivity. 24 hostages were freed yesterday. Several women and children were taken to Israel's Schneider Children's Medical Center by helicopter. Authorities say they're responding well to medical treatment. Director of Pediatrics, Gilad Livni, says she's hoping to see all hostages returned.
We're very exciting from the first moment. We saw the kids and their parents, the hugs and the crying, and it was very, very exciting for all of us. They are in good condition, and they are surrounded by our multidisciplinary teams, social workers, psychologists, nurses, and doctors. They are surrounded by the family, friends.
The Met Police have arrested a protester at a pro-Palestinian march in London on suspicion of inciting racial hatred. The force says officers spotted him carrying a placard with Nazi symbols on it. Thousands of protesters have gathered in London calling for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. Police officers are handing out leaflets warning against using words or images likely to land you in jail. Around 1,500 officers have been deployed for today's protests in London, which come amid a temporary truce in the Israel-Hamas conflict. Founder and chair of Friends of Al-Aqsa, Ismail Patel, told GB News what protesters hope to achieve today.
We're here today to highlight that oppose in the ceasefire does not mean freedom for the Palestinian people. We need to make sure there's a total ceasefire, an end to siege and an end to occupation. And our achievement really is to make sure that our government understands this and they enforce upon the Israelis to end the bombardment and the genocide that is taking place in Gaza.
Russia has hit Kyiv with the biggest drone attack of the conflict so far, according to Ukraine's Air Force. At least 5 people were injured when Shahid drones descended on the capital overnight. Explosions could be heard as they were intercepted, with buildings damaged across multiple districts. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has described the strikes as an act of willful terror. The former Minneapolis police officer convicted in the death of George Floyd has been stabbed in prison while serving his sentence. That's according to US media. 47-year-old Derek Chauvin was reportedly stabbed by another inmate in an Arizona prison on Friday and seriously injured. The incident comes after the Supreme Court rejected his appeal, where he argued he had not received a fair trial. Mr. Chauvin is serving multiple sentences for George Floyd's death in 2020, which triggered widespread protests against police brutality and racism. The first frost has bitten the UK as temperatures fell well below freezing across large parts of the country overnight. The Met Office says the cold spell could also see snowfall next week. Tonight is expected to be the coldest night of the season across the country, with sub-zero temperatures. And they could possibly reach -7 Celsius across northwestern England and in the south, and -4 in rural areas of Wales by tomorrow morning. And London's traditional Christmas tree has been chosen, and it's standing at an impressive 62 feet tall. Norway's customary Christmas gift has been felled ahead of its trip to the capital. It grew in Nordmarka in the forest just north of Oslo, and it'll be loaded onto a ship bound for British shores. The tree will arrive in central London this week, with the festive lights switching on December the 7th. The Norwegian spruce is sent each year as a token of thanks for Britain's support during the Second World War. This is GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now let's return to Nana.
Thank you, Sophia. It's fast approaching 6 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Now, coming up, the very latest on the Israel-Hamas conflict as 42 Palestinian prisoners are set to be released after an initial 24 hostages were set free by Hamas. With more expected in the coming days, I'll be speaking to the former British Army commander Richard Kemp live in Tel Aviv. Meanwhile, back home, the Metropolitan Police have issued leaflets to pro-Palestinian demonstrators warning them what language could land them in jail as protesters take to the streets. Not that they don't know. You would know that from the river to the sea is not acceptable. Well, I'll be covering the live protests in just a moment. Then stay tuned at 3:20. It's going to be explosive. It's climate control, of course. We're coming up to another COP. Is it COP out? COP 28? 27? How many of these things are they had? Yeah, 28 on Thursday. That's when it starts. The UN's environmental programme has warned that nations must go further than their current pledges in order to tackle the global warming crisis. So I'm asking, is the UK government doing enough? I'll be joined in the studio by Jim Dale and Paul Burgess to discuss. And of course, Howard Cox in my political spotlight this week. Howard is actually Reform UK's London mayoral candidate, and he'll be joining me in the studio with Heather Watts, an anti-ULEZ protester who got hurt following a collision with a ULEZ security car. You won't want to miss that story. That's coming up at 3:45. Then at 5, Hanan K is a TV personality and a motivational speaker who is living with polycystic ovarian syndrome and excess body hair. Now, she will be talking and speaking to me on the bullying that she endured when she was young and a mission to change the world, starting with yourself. That's what she says. That's coming up in the next hour. As ever, tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnews. So the top story now, of course, is Israel. 42 Palestinian prisoners will be released in exchange for 14 hostages which are being held by Hamas. Now, this follows the 24 hostages released yesterday and reunited with their family members. Meanwhile, a temporary pause in fighting has been established and expected to last until Monday. Well, joining me now for analysis is the former British Army Commander, Colonel Richard Kemp. Colonel Richard Kemp, thank you very much for joining me. So what's your view on the ongoing negotiations?
Well, I think, of course, the release of kidnapped Israeli citizens on the 7th of October is very good news, although it's only a relatively small number of them that have been released so far in 2 batches today and yesterday. That's clearly very good news. The downside, of course, is that twofold, really. I think, first of all, the deal has necessitated the release from Israeli prisons of convicted terrorists who have been released in about a proportion of 3 to 1 for the hostages. That's very bad, and I think it comes out clearly when you see the celebration and the treatment of them as heroes returning to freedom in the West Bank, which I think, if anything, just strengthens Hamas's hand there. Already Hamas is popular in the West Bank, but this adds to it because they're given credit for that release. And secondly, I think the other major disadvantage is that this interrupts Israel's prosecution of the destruction of Hamas, and it could lead, I think, to a longer-term ceasefire, which I think would be very bad news in terms of the need to destroy Hamas.
But a longer-term ceasefire would be a good thing for the people of Gaza, because we do need to separate them from Hamas, and we need to consider a lot of people are saying that it's not fair. 1,200 or 1,400 people were killed on October the 7th, and they're saying that this destruction of Gaza and the collateral damage that comes with it is not really comparable in terms of that Israel are going too far. So for those in Gaza, this will be obviously a welcome pause.
Well, I'm not sure it will be. Obviously, it's horrific, the death and destruction that's occurred in Gaza. But I don't think it's reasonable to compare, to sort of look at ratios of people killed. Hamas set out deliberately to murder 1,200 or more Israeli civilians, whereas the IDF is setting out to destroy the people that did that and prevent it from recurring as a threat. Unfortunately, many Palestinian civilians have died in that process because of the way Hamas fight, hiding behind the civilian population. But I think the greater evil here is not, unfortunately, it's maybe a horrible thing to say, it's not the death of innocent civilians in Gaza, but it's the perpetual threat that Hamas will continue to pose to Israel, and the oppression, of course, of the Palestinian people in Gaza by this terrorist regime.
Yeah, you would think, just in my humble opinion, that people within Gaza would actually be against Hamas, seeing as, in my view, it seems that they are the people perpetuating this conflict. Because if they stop, then this conflict, I suspect, would be over, or you think that Israel would continue to pursue Hamas?
No, I think if Hamas released all the prisoners, all the kidnapped people they captured, and laid down their weapons and surrendered effectively, or agreed to leave the Gaza Strip, I think Israel would stop fighting. That would be probably the most desirable outcome. I don't think it's very likely to happen, but that would be far preferable. It would stop the death and destruction, and it would allow Hamas to be replaced in Gaza by a regime that perhaps, hopefully, would be better for the people of Gaza, because it's Hamas that's brought this death and destruction onto the citizens of Gaza, and they have to be terminated.
It's going to be a tough job, of course. Now, we know that they unearthed a lot of the tunnels as well. I hear some of the media have been allowed to go into some of these tunnels, and one in particular under the hospital. Is that correct? And have you heard any reports of people doing this?
Yes, I believe that some Israeli media have been able, I don't know about international media, but able to see some of the tunnel network, and I think that's very important, because media, particularly media in the West, cast doubt over whether Hamas were using these hospitals as headquarters, as military bases, and therefore question why it was necessary for Israel to carry out attacks against Hamas terrorists near those hospitals. So I think it's important that the world does see the evidence, which, anyone who's been studying this problem for any length of time, including myself, know very well that Hamas used these places as hospitals, been documented as headquarters, been documented and proven in the past. But it is necessary to, I think, dismiss the doubts that have grown in the media.
Well, Colonel Richard Kemp, thank you so much. He's a former British Army commander. Thank you. He's live in Tel Aviv. Well, joining me in the studio is Will Geller for more analysis, and he's an international security analyst. Will, thank you very much for joining me. Right, so they've unearthed tunnels. Was there literally no doubt that these things existed? Because there seemed to be a lot of resistance and denial that there was even a tunnel underneath the hospital.
Well, I mean, as has always been proven out, and it's been known, as Richard was just saying, for many, many years, that under Al-Shifa Hospital, it was a Hamas stronghold. It was where they were keeping weapons. And there was a lot of misreporting by other news agencies, not your good selves. You've always been on the nose with these things. But other agencies like the BBC, for example, who said that the large collection of Kalashnikovs which were discovered in there perhaps were for the security department. There's a lot of twisting of the truth, there's a lot of ambiguity, a lot of fog. Al-Shifa Hospital has been known for many, many years, as Richard said, as a stronghold and position and HQ for Hamas.
Because I heard somebody saying there was a shed that no one was allowed to go into. And then there was a report in one of the papers where there was a British doctor who said who had worked in the hospital, and they were not allowed to go beyond a certain point.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So it's quite incredulous that actually the media had to get people in there to believe that this was happening. And there seems to be a ridiculous level of denial. I mean, I was listening on LBC of this woman who was talking to Elon Levy. He was on a show for a period of time. And she was literally saying that this isn't true, that this isn't happening, that the death and destruction on the 7th wasn't real, and a lot of the... Why do you think there seems to be this obsession with denial?
I have no idea. And the thing which is driving me insane is the just complete misunderstanding by many of the people turning up for the pro-Palestine marches in understanding exactly what River to the Sea actually means. And will chant anything and will simply go along. Maybe they haven't got anything better to do with their day. And I'm sure I'm going to insult a few people by saying that. But I have Palestinian friends, and these are friends who can tell you from their own mouths, having been down there, that Hamas has been controlling the whole area. They've controlled Gaza. Gaza is pretty much Hamas's location. And the Palestinians, to go back to the point that obviously you were covering earlier about the number of casualties, firstly, a lot of those details are coming from Hamas. When I say, as is always the case, we couldn't necessarily believe anything that comes out of their mouths. So in terms of that real catalogue of how many casualties there have been, and yes, inevitably there have been, and I'm not denying that there haven't, but we will only find out in time exactly what it is. Hamas have also been holding Palestinians there. A vast majority of them have already effected their escape and evacuation through south of Gaza, and a lot of that has also been helped and facilitated by the IDF. They have helped them with that safe passage. But Hamas will use Palestinians as human shields.
Well, we'll get us. You'll stay with me for a little bit. I'm going to go live now, though, to Tel Aviv. Joining me is Uri Geller. He's a mystifier, and he's there now. Uri, thank you so much for joining me. It's always good to talk to you. So can you give me an update of how things are and what the mood is like in Israel? Many hostages being released.
Yes, well, as we speak right now, you know, yesterday there were hostages, children released. Today, I believe 13. As we speak now, I can look at the big screen. I'm standing in my museum, and you can see the trucks and the commotion. Obviously, there is euphoria in Israel. People are happy. You see children running towards their fathers hugging them, and so on. But Nana, you must remember that there are still well over 200 hostages being held, including a 10-month-old baby, and a baby born, believe it or not, in captivity. There are women and children and old people, as well as innocent men of all ages. Every single one of them must be released. Now, look, Israel is willing to pay a very high price to free the hostages. They're willing to exchange 3 Palestinian prisoners for every one Israeli. And, Nana, you might not know this, but when you read about Palestinian women, yes, and teenagers being released, these are not innocent people. Every single one of them has been charged or convicted of some kind of an attack, including stabbing innocent Israelis, trying to set off car bombs, and they're all terrorists. But right now, the feeling is great. Children are being released.
Well, we're obviously very happy to see that people are being released. But one of the things that I did note was, I don't know whether you saw the interview with Kay Burley with Elon Levy, where he made some ridiculous comparison. And I don't know whether you saw that. Did you see that, Uri? It went viral.
Good.
Oh, we've lost your sound. Oh, we've lost your sound, Uri.
Oh,
sorry, can you hear me now, Uri?
Why?
Oh, we can hear you now.
I can hear you.
Yeah,
can you
sorry,
hear me?
I can hear you now, yes.
Listen, on the same token, I want to show you my Cadillac. Shippy, turn the car. I have 2,600 spoons of very famous people. I had Gary Lineker's spoon on my Cadillac, and I took it off. And you know why I took it off? Because I was shocked and outraged this week by your competitor, the BBC. I believe you once worked for the BBC. Its highest paid presenter, Gary Lineker, endorsed the tweet which said Israel was committing genocide in Gaza. Genocide? This is appalling. And the BBC did nothing. Gary Lineker and the BBC should be ashamed of themselves. How do you think the BBC's Jewish staff must be feeling? You know, they're Jewish journalists. To accuse Israel, of all countries, of genocide, the BBC should fire Lineker. This is my opinion. And condemn his tweet instead of paying him a fortune. And by the way, to finalize, accusing Israel of genocide in Gaza, is absurd. Because in the last 50 years, in the last 50 years, the population of Gaza has grown by more than 6 times. What kind of genocide is this where the population grows? If Israel is committing genocide, then it is doing a very bad job.
Well, listen, Uri, Gary's not here to defend himself, but he should not have endorsed that tweet. And I'm not quite sure why these BBC bosses have done nothing about it. It's actually quite disgraceful. But do you know, earlier, I mean, they're not alone in their sort of questioning and behaviour. Did you see this clip? I'll play it for you. This is the one with Kay Burley when she's talking to Elon Levy. Have a listen.
Speaking to a hostage negotiator this morning, he made the comparison between the 50 hostages that Hamas has promised to release, as opposed to the 150 prisoners that are Palestinians that Israel has said that it will release. And he made the comparison between the numbers and the fact that does Israel not think that Palestinian lives are valued as highly as Israeli lives?
That is an astonishing accusation.
So this is how some of the media...
Let me repeat. It is an astonishing accusation. And, you know, it went viral, not only because of the terrible and appalling accusation and the question, but because his eyebrows. He went, what? He went like that. He couldn't believe the question. So, look, we are faced with this thing all the time. Unfortunately, once more, I'll repeat it. There are 1.7 billion Muslims out there. We have nothing towards the Palestinians. We are accepting children into Israeli hospitals. We are getting them well. We are healing them. It's the Hamas, it's the jihadists that we have a war with. And that's all I can say.
Well, listen, Uri, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Stay safe, and we'll speak to you again. Thank you. That's Uri Geller. He's a mystifier. He's there in Tel Aviv giving you his take on what's happening. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Coming up, my political spotlight for the week. Driving instructor Heather Watts was struck by a security car guarding one of Sadiq Khan's ULEZ camera vans. And she'll be joining me in the studio alongside Howard Cox, Reform UK's mayoral candidate, to discuss and tell us what happened. But up next, it's time for climate control. The UN Environmental Programme has warned that nations must go further than their current pledges in order to tackle global warming. So I'm asking, is the UK government doing enough? We'll be discussing that with Jim Dale and Paul Burgess. This is GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. It's fast approaching 26 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and it's time for Climate Control. We discuss and debate the topic around the climate. Now, ahead of COP28, which is set to begin next Thursday, the United Nations Environmental Programme has warned that nations must go further than their current pledges in order to tackle global warming. So, for Climate Control, I'm asking, is the UK government doing enough? Joining me in the studio, meteorologist and social commentator Jim Dale, alongside climate scientist Paul Burgess. So, I'm going to start with you, Paul Burgess.
All right.
Are the UK doing enough?
They're doing too much. Let me explain why. I always produce the facts. This is the CO2 curve for the world, which everyone accepts. There's no...
If you hold that very still so we can...
OK.
And you keep talking.
This. OK. Now, Tony Heller, a sceptic, plotted all the different conferences onto the CO2 curve. They make no difference at all. No, nothing at all. So insanity is called doing the same thing many times over, expecting a different result. So it makes no difference. What we're doing, if I now show you the second graph...
What's that?
That is a graph of the CO2 being produced by the different continents.
So what's the one at the top?
Asia.
Asia. This CO2 from Asia, yeah.
These are the Western countries like America and Europe.
At the very bottom, you've got America.
Yes. Now, we've reduced it very slightly.
We're in the middle.
Pardon?
We're in the middle.
The middle is North America and Europe. That's North America.
Well, listen, next time you've got stuff like that, give it to us and we'll try and put it on the screen.
OK, fine. So that's North America and Europe. But this growth here is now even accelerating. China's just announced a big increase in coal. We're now burning more coal than ever in human history.
Yeah.
We're now burning more oil than ever in human history. So just to ignore that and say we've got to do more, whilst the effect of that, where I come from in Wales, is Tata Steel are making 3,000 people redundant, putting in an electric furnace that actually is destroying 3,000 jobs, which would probably knock on to 10,000 in the area. So a total area is economically devastated for the sake of nothing. And worse than that, we're paying £500 million worth of taxpayers' money towards it. And worse than that, we can't even make proper steel with it. So you can't make construction steel or boat steel or bridge steel.
So
you
we
have to import that.
Import it from China.
Yeah, so that is a madness. That's what I want to say.
So he says that we're doing too much and other nations should be doing more? Are you saying others should be doing more?
No, because I want more CO2, so they're doing us a favour.
OK, so eyes wide shut, Paul. That's basically where you are. You've missed the last few years of what's happening globally in terms of what the CO2 levels are doing, in terms of increasing global temperatures. This week we had 2 days where temperatures reached plus 2 degrees, over 2 degrees, not 1.5 but 2 degrees on single days, consecutive days, globally averaged out, which is a signpost for, in terms of going forward. So is this government doing enough? Nowhere near enough. It's put the brakes on. It talks a bad talk.
But look, what's happened to us, though? We've gone this to whatever you're saying.
Yeah.
I don't know where they're taking the temperature from, but irrespective of that, what has happened to us?
Thousands of stations. What's happened to us? As I said 2 seconds ago, eyes wide shut. You've just got to look at
anything.
It does mean you're not looking at what's going on around the world in terms of the climate incidents, the climate catastrophes that have happened this year, not just this year, but the year before, and consecutive from that point onwards. They're only going to get worse. I mark it now, 2024, even before we get to New Year's Eve. I'll say to you now, it will continue. There will be further catastrophes caused by climate change. That's why they've made that warning about not exceeding, heading for 2.5.
Give me, in your views, the latest catastrophe that has happened recently. What's the latest one?
Well, I think, look, it's virtually every day there's something new. Virtually every single day. And I guess the latest one will be the Antarctic ice shelf on the western side starting to melt faster than what's been seen previously. There's a massive iceberg that's just dislocated itself and is moving away the size of Greater London.
So you're saying an iceberg that's broken away is one of the examples of the climate catastrophe?
It's a sign. Without a shadow of a doubt, it's ice melting. Go to the glaciers in Switzerland, in Austria. They're receding like crazy.
So he says, Paul, that an iceberg melting is one of the biggest climate catastrophes that has just happened recently.
Well, the first point I made, by the way, is no matter what we do, it makes no difference at all. We're just destroying our economy. That's the first point. The second point is Jim doesn't understand what climate is because he keeps quoting weather, and that is not climate. As regards Antarctica, I've got it here. NASA have declared openly and truthfully that every decade the temperatures drop by a degree. For 40 years, Antarctica's cooling. And you know what cools Antarctica? And by the way, the scientists on both sides agree on this, as does the satellite. Actually, CO2 cools Antarctica because of the Antarctic inversion. Obviously, that's going into some science.
Paul, I really...
No, hold on.
I really don't know where you get your information from, because you come on here... No, listen, you come on here and you go completely and utterly against climate scientists, up to, nearly 100%, not just climate scientists. You mentioned NASA. NASA are not on your side. They never have been. But they're quite polar opposite. The World Meteorological Organization, exactly the same. Your bits of paper are worthless because they are fed. I can tell you now, they're fed from the fossil fuel industry. Simple. And that's what you've been taken in with.
Anybody. I actually fork out a lot of money to do what I'm doing. I'm not subsidised. I subsidise it. Even today, you're out. All I get are my expenses, not any money. So look...
You're completely out on a limb.
Hang on, let Paul respond.
I can quote the IPCC. Here's a table from the AR6 report. All this extreme weather you're talking about is not true. Your side does not support it. No matter, I've got it all here, and these are official things.
So the record temperatures that we've seen in the last year, 2023, 2022, the 40 degrees C that we saw, 40.3 degrees that we saw in the UK, plus lots and lots of other records actually falling. And don't say for 1 second, oh, that was an airport.
Where was it?
It was on the side of Heathrow runway.
No, it was Coningsby, actually. It was Coningsby.
Coningsby is an RAF
in Lincolnshire, in the middle of nowhere. So what about Aberporth? What about other areas?
Sorry.
There is hundreds of stations.
You don't understand climate. Climate.
I perfectly understand climate. I understand the difference,
I am
Paul.
using all the science. And not only that, after each one of these confrontations, Jim, I post a video and give every reference to everything I've claimed. Every time. And that's to protect GB News. Because I'm a sceptic. Yes, I am on the sceptic side, right? But I'm a scientist. I'll tell you what science is about, Jim.
Well, listen, we're running out of time, so you've got 10 seconds to say it.
All right,
science is about finding the truth.
It doesn't matter how beautiful your theory is. It doesn't matter how smart you are. If it doesn't agree with experiment, it's wrong. It's got to agree with observation to be right. That's a fundamental.
I'm a meteorological observer.
Jim Dale, meteorologist and social commentator, and Paul Burgess, thank you so much. Right, so what are your thoughts? gbviews@gbnews.com. Always a pleasure to get those two on. This is GB News. On the way, my political spotlight. I'll be speaking to Reform UK's London mayoral candidate Howard Cox, alongside driving instructor Heather Watts, who was struck by a security car guarding one of Sadiq Khan's camera vans. But first, let's get your latest news headlines with Aaron.
It is 3:33. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. Hamas is due to release a group of hostages through the Rafah crossing today. Israel has received a list of 13 people who will be freed from captivity. Egyptian authorities are waiting for their arrival at the Rafah crossing on the border with Gaza. Meanwhile, Israel is also preparing to release 39 Palestinian prisoners in the second phase of the hostage deal. Meanwhile, Yoni Katz-Asher's been reunited with his wife Doron and their two daughters Raz and Aviv, who were taken into captivity for the past 7 weeks. 24 hostages were freed yesterday. Several women and children were taken to the Schneider Children's Medical Centre in Israel. So authorities say they're responding well to medical treatment. The Met Police have arrested a protester at a pro-Palestinian march in London on suspicion of inciting racial hatred. The force says officers spotted him carrying a placard with Nazi symbols on it. Thousands of people have gathered in London calling for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. Police officers have been handing out leaflets warning against using words or images that are, in their words, likely to land you in jail. The former Minneapolis police officer convicted over the death of George Floyd has been stabbed in prison while serving his sentence. That's according to media in the United States. 47-year-old Derek Chauvin was stabbed by another inmate at a prison in Arizona, and he was seriously injured. The incident comes days after the Supreme Court rejected his appeal. He had argued he'd not received a fair trial. Well, we'll have a full bulletin at the top of the hour, or there's more right now on our website, gbnews.com.
Coming up, shining a light in my political spotlight, Heather Watts, who was struck by a security car guarding one of Sadiq Khan's ULEZ vans. We'll be speaking to her alongside Howard Cox. That is on the way.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akua, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet?
What is this?
It's
my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, welcome back. 39 minutes after 3 o'clock. If you've just joined me, wherever you've been, it's fine. You've only missed 39 minutes. We've got loads more to come. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, the Metropolitan Police have been handing out leaflet warnings over language that breaks the law as thousands of pro-Palestine protesters gather in London. The protesters are calling for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza as hostage negotiations take place. Meanwhile, around about 1,500 officers are taking to the grounds of the protest, and one protester has been arrested. So at the pro-Palestinian rally earlier was GB News political correspondent Catherine Forster. Let's see what she had to say.
This is the 7th consecutive Saturday that there's been a pro-Palestinian protest in central London. I've reported on a few of these. They tend to follow a similar pattern. They start out very peaceful. There's babies in buggies, there's people with dogs, people in wheelchairs, all ages, all ethnicities. Things often turn unpleasant a little bit later. Of course, there's always people out for trouble. The police have been handing out leaflets trying to clarify to protesters what might get them arrested. They'd rather not arrest people, but inevitably it looks like there's always a few. But in the last hour or so, we, the cameraman, our backwatcher who's here to keep us safe, had really quite an unpleasant experience. A guy on a tannoy shouting at us, wanted to know who we were broadcasting from. He wouldn't go away. He was very persistent. Eventually, I said GB News. At that point, he just, I can't tell you what he said, but it was vile, fascist scum, etc. A group of people came round us, all shouting at us. I have to say, it was very intimidating. I was shaking by the end of it. We then moved to a completely different place, and at the end of that live, lo and behold, he appeared again. The police spoke to him. He's been moved on. We've been told to stay here, and we're filing a police report. But yeah, most people are very peaceful here, but there's always an element. And of course, it's really important that the press can bring you the news, can tell you what's going on. If it wasn't for the press, we wouldn't even know what was happening in Israel, in Gaza. But intimidating the press on the streets of London, not okay at all.
So that was Catherine Forster. She was at the pro-Palestinian rally in London earlier. If you just tuned in, welcome. This is GB News. It's time now, though, for this week's political spotlight. So joining me to shine a light is Reform UK London mayoral candidate Howard Cox, as well as driving instructor Heather Watt and campaigner Claire Dyer. Right, so talk to me about what happened then. So I'll start with you, Howard. You're in the middle of these two beauties, these beautiful ladies. So nice for you to join me. Now, the reason why I wanted to talk about this was because Sadiq Khan has got these ULEZ cameras that have proved to be very unpopular. In fact, the majority of those in London voted against having them in there on the outer part of London. He's had them installed, and in doing that, we've obviously got these team of people, they're called the Blade Runners, ankle grinding or whatever, knocking down these cameras at force. So Sadiq Khan has put some sort of protections in place to stop this from happening. So can you take it from there, Howard? What's happening?
OK, well, I can't condone the Blade Runners. That would be wrong to do that.
No, but nobody's condoning it. This is part of why.
Well, what's happened now is, of course, because a lot of the cameras have been knocked down, they've decided to resort to using cameras on the backs of vans. And what's happening now is that because they're also being blocked, peacefully blocked, and this is what my two colleagues here sitting here were actually protesting about in front of vans, what's happening now is that it's so disrespectful to Khan. He's actually employed thugs, security thugs, who are not recognisable, etc., to protect these vans.
When you say thugs, how do you know that they're thugs? Well, you say they're not recognisable. In what way?
Well, a lot of them have balaclavas on. A lot of them do not have recognisable security identification tags. And these guys will tell you much more in a minute about the detail of all of this. But I was alerted to this, but right across London, a good 8 or 9 incidences where these security guys are actually, fundamentally, are breaking the law. They are actually using their alleged powers in terms of protecting these vans to actually threaten people and abuse people.
Well, Sadiq Khan would say that what he's doing is protecting property, which is obviously within his jurisdiction as London Mayor, and he has right to do that because over 1,000 of his cameras have so far been taken down by these Blade Runners, so surely he's within his rights to protect them.
But he's not going for the Blade Runners, he's going for genuine peaceful protesters around the vans who are just saying, no, we do not want this. As you rightly reported, 2 out of 3 people objected to ULEZ, and these are people continue this protest peacefully and lawfully.
Well, Heather, talk to me about what happened to you then.
Well, where I was hit was at the end of my road. So we saw on Facebook or whatever the fact that there was going to be a camera van at the end of the road. My husband and I went up there. We are peacefully protesting, if you like. We do not touch their vans. We've got a big sign that we hold up in front of the camera, which we're legally allowed to do, peacefully protest. And that's what we were doing there. Basically, some other hooligan, whoever it may have been, came and sprayed their van, and incidentally my husband's car, with some foam or another, which the security people then decided to call the police. And their security van, or their car, should I say, because there's always 2 or 3, well, at least 2 cars round the corner with more security guards in it. So the security guards arrived. One of them, apparently, I didn't see it, but pushed one of the other protesters that had just arrived, accused him of spraying the car. It wasn't him. Don't know who it was. And there was a little bit of a to-do, if you like. Nothing violent, as in there was no punching or kicking or anything like that. But this guy got pushed, so he was a bit loud. The van decided it wanted to go without waiting for the police. I was asked, because they know that I'm quiet and reasonable, I was asked by one of the security guards that was in the actual van itself if I could help them leave. And I said, I'm not going to help you leave. I'm not going to stop you. So with that, I walked to the rear of the van, which then put me between the van and the security car.
Oh, God, no.
The van has gone. The security guard, the passenger, got into the car. And you can clearly see on the video, I'm just meandering at the back of the van or in front of the car at that point, not really paying a lot of attention. The security guard's got into the car and he's gone like that to the driver. I could see that through the windscreen. And he just drove at me.
Oh!
I've hobbled away because he really hurt me.
He hit you, so he
hit me.
And there was a car behind you that was stationary, is that what you're saying? So you were in between 2 cars?
No, the van had gone.
The van had gone.
And the security car is the one that actually hit me. It then pushed me, as in it hit me and knocked me off my feet onto the bonnet of the car.
Oh, my gosh.
I've then hobbled away. And I think it happened so quickly, but I think I got hit a second time, which then knocked me to the side of the road on the floor.
Claire, you saw all this, so is she right? Was
that is... Yes.
What did you...
What actually also happened before was, so I do know and I heard they had called the police because of this incident. They were waiting for the police and then they were given an order from their team leader, or whoever that is, to Foxtrot Oscar. That's the order. That's what was said. I heard that said. With that, it became very erratic. The security, there was 6 security to Heather, her husband, another very quiet man, and then obviously this other guy. And they became very erratic trying to get this van out. And it did actually sort of side knock somebody as it drove off, which is how most people kind of ended up in the road. Like I said, that's how Heather was already between the 2 vehicles. And then the other security got in the passenger car. I said, you can't let them go, because there are some security that we do know and we get on with. So there was 2 out of the 6 that we do know and are amenable and we get on fine with them. And I said, you can't let them leave. I said, because they've just knocked somebody.
Yeah.
But all they cared about was getting the support car, which isn't very well marked. It just has like a maintenance kind of sticker strip across the back of it and just a plain yellow strip down the side. They're Peugeots. And, yes, he essentially got in the passenger car and was waving him on. And as Heather said, yes, she was hit a second time. She couldn't get out of the way. And as she was trying to walk away, that's when they did actually just drive off and knocked her to the ground on the side of the road. And then I essentially did chase after them because there was no intentions of them stopping. So I followed them and got them stopped some 5-6 miles down the road where the police intercepted them.
Absolutely.
You can see why I call them thugs.
Well, look.
I can talk a lot about that.
No, I want to show you. So just a warning from home, if you're watching at home, that some of the images you might see might be quite distressing, but I wanted to show you what happened to Heather's leg so you can see the damage. This is one of the bruises. If you're listening on the radio, Heather's got a big, almost like a bloodshot kind of patch all around the side of her knee. And then all around. Is this the other leg?
No, it's the same leg.
Same leg on the outside of the same leg. A bruise that's almost like a line going all the way down, and then her foot also another bruise on the side of her foot, a very swollen leg as well. She's got a crutch on the side there, but she's got one big, almost like a blistered bruise just below the skin surface. It's like a real kind of maroon red, and so you can imagine the pain that must have been. I mean, that's quite a serious
I'm still in an awful lot of pain now, 13 days later.
This is only 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, 2 weeks tomorrow. But the thing is, whenever it's been reported in the papers or anything else, TfL's response to the reporters has always been there was no serious injuries. Nobody from TfL or anybody else has contacted me, and I'm having to chase the police investigation unit to actually get them to investigate. Anybody else would have been arrested straight away and taken to the police station, whatever else. They spoke to the men at the side of the road when they eventually caught them after leaving the scene of an accident, and they were let go. I have no idea who to claim from. I have nobody's name, I have nobody's address, I have nobody's insurance details. And I've lost work, and I won't be working next week either, because legally I can't because I'm on crutches.
Yeah, well, listen, we're having a situation with your microphone at the moment. We'll come and sort that out. But, Claire, you saw all of this. What have you done as a result? Because I know you apparently chased the driver.
Well, I traced both of them, yeah. I managed to get the reg of the van, which we didn't have at that time, and got them stopped. And stood in front of the van, and they tried to drive into me. The van was trying to move forward, budging me onto a roundabout with me standing in front, whilst on the phone to the police saying, you're not going anywhere because you've just run someone over. What I was concerned about was, I think if this was a different incident with just everyday people, it would be handled differently. I just felt that based on the fact that they change vehicles all the time, you don't have the same drivers and the same security to the same vehicle, that once that vehicle got on the M25, we would have a much harder job trying to pinpoint who was actually driving that vehicle, because I believe it would be covered. Yeah. But this is part of a much wider issue. You know, I wouldn't say we're protesters as such. What we all are collectively, and it has to be said, that these camera vans are actually coming into the boroughs that opposed ULEZ in the first place, and their suburban areas. So where we are, we're surrounded by countryside, fields and valleys. And we don't have trains and we don't have trams and we don't have very good public transport. So we already have a proportion of people, especially elderly, whose cars were not compliant, cannot afford to buy a new car, and are now essentially stuck at home. So what we are a collective of residents who care about the people in our community. And this is the same where if you want to call us fan blockers.
But you're not doing a Just Stop Oil.
No, we're not exactly
in that way. You're simply making an orderly protest, just like the pro-Palestinian protesters who I think are hate marches. But hey, hey-ho.
So we have actually a good relationship with the police, because police do come out, and we have a very good relationship with them. It's amicable. There's no issues. Very sympathetic. And we said as long as we don't touch the vans, which we don't.
But somebody did spray some paint on them, which initially made them angry. Yeah. Yeah, so that's the problem, is that somebody did do something that was irritating. Howard, you've got about 20 seconds. What's next for this then?
Well, we've got to actually get to the bottom of this, so who did this for a start. But we also want to get to the bottom of the bigger picture. Who authorises this? This is taxpayers' money being used to actually orchestrate and I'm sorry, I'm going to say this, thugs, to actually hit innocent people.
Well, obviously he didn't do it on purpose, I'm sure.
No, he did do it on purpose.
No, but you don't know. But listen, this is what the spokesperson for the Mayor of London says. Any injury is, of course, a serious matter, and the Met and TfL are investigating the circumstances of this incident. Meanwhile, the Metropolitan Police say police are investigating the circumstances of an allegation of criminal damage and a road traffic collision in Biggin Hill. A further call was received stating a woman has been injured after being in collision with a vehicle and it attempted to leave the scene. She was not seriously hurt. All parties involved were spoken to, and the investigation to both remains ongoing. Well, she said they haven't spoken to her, so perhaps they should. Thank you very much, Heather, Claire and Howard, for joining me. If you've just tuned in, stay tuned. Loads more still to come. This is GB News. More to come in the next hour, including my monologue on Nigel Farage in the jungle and cancel culture among the woke left PC brigade. But first, let's get somewhere.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. It is staying on the cold side as we move through the rest of the weekend, frost returning tonight, but we will have rain moving in from the Atlantic, and we can see that on the bigger picture. High pressure moves away as we head through into the second half of the weekend, replaced by low pressure bringing outbreaks of rain. Turning chilly this evening for many areas as skies clear, temperatures will tumble away. However, into the early hours, thicker cloud will move into the far west. Outbreaks of rain moving into parts of Northern Ireland. Some mist and fog patches ahead of the rain, and temperatures, well, towns and cities close to freezing, below freezing in the countryside. -4 or -5 Celsius is possible, but it means a sunny start with those fog patches still around first thing further north and east. Thicker cloud in the west, outbreaks of rain moving in, and this slowly pushing its way eastwards through the day. Best of the sunshine holding on across parts of Scotland, thicker cloud developing elsewhere, and the wind's just starting to increase across the far southwest as mild air approaches here, 11 or 12 Celsius, but elsewhere, cold day once more, 4 or 5 degrees at best. Into Monday, that low pressure is still around, giving outbreaks of showery rain across England and Wales in particular, some heavy bursts possible. Brighter skies for Northern Ireland and Scotland, but quite windy across some eastern coasts. And it stays unsettled as we move through this week with further outbreaks of rain and temperatures on the cold side.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next 2 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, and also former Labour Party advisor Matthew Lala. I
told you, Nana?
I couldn't resist.
I'll let you up. Only you.
Thank you. That's so good of you. But before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines with Sophia.
Good afternoon. It's 4 o'clock. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. Hamas is due to release a second group of hostages today in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. Israel's received a list of 13 people who will be freed from captivity in Gaza. Egyptian authorities are waiting for their arrival at the Rafah border crossing. Now, as part of the deal brokered by Qatar, Israel's preparing to release 39 Palestinian prisoners on the second of a 4-day pause in fighting. Meanwhile, Yoni Katz-Asher's been reunited with his wife Doron and their daughters Raz and Aviv, who've spent the last 7 weeks in captivity. 24 hostages were freed yesterday. Several women and children were taken to Israel's Schneider Children's Medical Centre, where authorities say they're responding well to treatment. Director of Paediatrics, Gilad Livni, says he hopes all hostages will be returned.
We're very exciting from the first moment. We saw the kids and their parents, the hugs and the crying, and it was very, very exciting for all of us. They are in good condition. And they are surrounded by our multidisciplinary teams, social workers, psychologists, nurses and doctors. They are surrounded by the family, friends.
In London, police have arrested a protester at a pro-Palestinian march on suspicion of inciting racial hatred. Officers say he was seen carrying a placard with Nazi symbols on it. Tens of thousands of demonstrators are calling for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. Police officers have been handing out leaflets warning against using words or images that are, in their words, likely to land you in jail. Around 1,500 officers have been deployed for today's protests. Ismail Patel from Friends of Al-Aqsa, a group that campaigns for Palestinian rights, told GB News what they're hoping to achieve.
We're here today to highlight that a pause in the ceasefire does not mean freedom for the Palestinian people. We need to make sure there's a total ceasefire, an end to siege and an end to occupation. And our achievement really is to make sure that our government understands this and they enforce upon the Israelis to end the bombardment and the genocide that is taking place in Gaza.
Russia's hit Kyiv with the biggest drone attack of the conflict so far. That's according to Ukraine's Air Force. At least 5 people were injured when Shahed drones descended on the capital overnight. Explosions could be heard as they were intercepted, with buildings damaged across multiple districts. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has described the strikes as an act of willful terror. The former Minneapolis police officer convicted for the death of George Floyd has been stabbed in prison while serving his sentence, that's according to media in the United States. 47-year-old Derek Chauvin was reportedly stabbed by an inmate at a prison in Arizona on Friday and seriously injured. The incident comes days after the Supreme Court rejected his appeal, where he argued he'd not received a fair trial. Mr. Chauvin is serving multiple sentences for George Floyd's death in 2020, which triggered widespread protests against police brutality and racism. The first frost has bitten the UK as temperatures fell well below freezing across large parts of the country overnight. The Met Office says the cold spell could see snowfall later this week. Tonight is expected to be the coldest night of the season across the country, with sub-zero temperatures that could possibly reach -7 degrees Celsius across northwestern England and also in the south, and -4 in rural areas of Wales tomorrow morning. London's traditional Christmas tree has been chosen, standing at an impressive 62 feet tall. Norway's customary Christmas gift's been felled ahead of its trip to the capital. It grew in Nordmarka, in forest just north of Oslo, and will be loaded onto a ship bound for Britain. The tree will arrive in central London this week, with the festive lights being switched on the 7th of December. The Norwegian spruce is sent each year as a token of thanks for Britain's support during the Second World War. We're live across the UK on TV, on digital radio. If you want us on your smart speaker, say play GB News. Now it's back to Nana.
Thank you, Aaron. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. It's fast approaching 6 minutes after 4 o'clock. The TikTok Gen Z are the taste of things to come. I like to call this one sticks and stones. So unless you've been living under a rock, you couldn't have missed Nigel Farage in I'm a Celebrity in the Jungle. Now, I'll be honest, I haven't watched the show for years, but I tuned in for Nigel. So, in between the jibes from Ant and Dec about GB News, which weren't becoming of them, to be frank, I witnessed cancel culture firsthand. Nella Rose, a 26-year-old larger-than-life influencer who, to be fair, has a rags and riches story, she cancelled First Date Fred on the spot because he said that he could be her father. Now, we all know that that means that's because he's so old in comparison, but Nella decided because she told him about the loss of her father that he was in some way insulting her. And when Fred realised that she was upset, he apologised for any misunderstanding, but she wasn't having any of it. It's not as if he was deliberately trying to cause offence, but unforgivingly, she defined her territory and refused to eat anything he cooked. Not that that would be that bad, but that was that. Well, at this rate, there'll be no one left. Everyone will be walking on eggshells. What happened to sticks and stones will break my bones, but names or words will never hurt me? Another altercation was obviously not far behind. I mean, this time it was with Nigel, when she told him, as though it were fact, that black people didn't like him and that he was anti-immigrant. And when he asked where did he hear this, well, where did she hear this, she said, the internet. Have a listen.
But this is what I was saying to you.
Apparently you're anti-immigrants.
Who told you that?
Oh, the internet.
Oh, well, there we are, then. It must be true. It must be true.
It must be.
It must be true.
The internet told her, God help us. To be fair, she did agree to disagree, which was, I thought, quite mature of her. And then when Sam, who has ADHD, tried to G her up for the trial, she was patronising and, in my view, cruel. She sat him down to show him how to behave. I've no doubt that she thought that she was being kind, but in my view, the opposite was true. I blame the woke PC brigade for covering our children in cotton wool. I mean, when I was young, a game of conkers was standard, as was playing British Bulldog. If you lost a race or came last, so be it. You learned a lesson. Try harder next time. There was none of this, everyone's a winner, and it's the taking part that counts. In my day, if you lose, you deal with it. But that was before the internet. But what can you expect from the younger generation when you've got the likes of woke Lorraine Kelly body-shaming Nigel?
What, 59? He's got plenty of years ahead of him. Maybe he wants to get going again.
Is he only 59? I thought he was a hell of a lot older than that. That's astonishing. Just shows you get the face you deserve. Yeah. Frankly.
Can you imagine if this were about a woman? Nigel has handled himself with dignity throughout. ITV must be spitting feathers. What happened in the jungle was the epitome of cancel culture, and it's clear that many of our young people have been captured by it. A TikTok Generation Z, unable to cope with diversity of opinion. Anyone who strays from a narrative is cancelled. So before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is the hostage deal a major victory for Israel? As the first groups of hostages have been released, with more expected to be released over the weekend, has the truce provided Hamas an advantage and cast doubt on Israel's goal of eliminating the terrorist organisation, or is this a victory for Israel? And then stay tuned at 4:50 is Royal Roundup time. Royal biographer Angela Levin will be here to give us the latest from behind the palace walls. On the menu, we'll be discussing Meghan Markle's claims that there are two royal racists who discussed Archie's skin colour. So not one, there's another one now. That is according to a bombshell new book by Obid Scobie, sorry about that. And we'll also be discussing Catherine and Camilla's warming relationship. Then at 5, it's my difficult conversation. Motivational speaker Hanan K will be live in the studio now. She's drawing on her battled scars and struggles as she was bullied as a teenager. She's inspiring people across the globe to embrace their beauty, no matter what form it may come in. And if you're watching or listening on radio, she has a beard that is a full-on, what you would think is a male beard, but she actually suffers with polycystic ovaries. So we'll be speaking to her about that. That's coming up in the next hour. Tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnews. Right, let's get started. Let's welcome again to my panel broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, and also former Labour advisor Matthew Laza. Right, Lizzie Cundy, I'm going to start with you. Have you been watching The Jungle?
Have I been watching? I love it. I even watch it again. I record it and watch it twice. I go back to Nigel in the bath. Thought he's got a great bottom, actually.
Lizzie, revelation.
No, I do. And I think that it's quite mean that they keep, catching him in the bath as well all the time. They didn't do that to Mylene Klaas and others. OK, she did the shower bit, but didn't keep going back to it.
Well, when they went back to her, it was sort of beautiful and good, but when it goes back to him, it's like, oh, my God.
No, and I think Nigel is doing the most fantastic job. He's up for every challenge and trial. I mean, that eating challenge, I couldn't believe it. I mean, he had 4 different types of, what should we call it, to eat, and didn't even, just got it down him. He was wonderful. But I was a bit shocked at Nella Rose, and I thought this just sums up the whole of this woke nonsense. I mean, I felt embarrassed for her, and then she was voted to do the trials next, so I think everyone else did. And I think what's happening is people... I mean, Nigel's reaching out to a whole new audience, and from what I know, the younger generation are really enjoying him and loving him, and it's really gone against Nella Rose. I mean, fancy saying that, what she said about all blacks saying he's racist, and he was in South London. What? She's like, you're in South London? I mean, it was really narrow-minded. Sadly, she's not educated, and it's just showing her ignorance and very arrogant, to be honest. And I think Nigel handled himself so well. He was brilliant. He's my winner. He's king of the jungle.
What do you think, Matthew?
So, I think that, Nella is driving more people who might not have liked Nigel in the first place right into his metaphorical arms, certainly, to vote for him. It's just, it was an extraordinary outburst, and he did handle it with great dignity. But I think the more, even more upsetting was the treatment of Sam. I mean, as you say,
she was so rude.
She would regard herself as the kind of queen of woke. But actually, she's the queen of herself. It's all about her, and that's what I think is worrying. It's people. It's all about themselves. And I know that's because she's from TikTok. Of course, TikTok is literally just about you and your phone. It's not like you're, part of a band or you're an actor and you're working in a team. You're not working in a team when you're on TikTok. You're just it's me.
You're really true there. That is a really good point. And these reality shows, they can either make you or really break you. And I'm afraid for Nella Rose, I think she's going to be first out in my books. I think
Oh,
she's
no, I
really
think
let
we'll
herself
keep her
down.
in.
What, make her do all
keep
the
her in.
trial.
Yeah, keep her
but,
in.
But
Keep
as
her in.
and Nigel's a team player. He was so supportive to her when she was doing the eating challenge. I mean, Nigel is just everyone's friend, and he's a great conversationalist. I mean,
He's
the
lovely.
stories he tells. You know, and anyone, you know, even is not interested in politics, he's so entertaining.
But
He
what
is.
about Ant and Dec? Because they've laid into GB News a few times, and I think it's
How are Keith and
counterproductive. Keith and who was it? Keith and
Linda.
I mean, like, you know, all the feud and the dog and extra viewer. It was all. It really actually put me off them when I heard them talking like that.
No, but they were cheap shots. I think the best thing to do is to laugh. I was on a Monday, and our wonderful audience were all emailing and texting in, and they were all Keith and Linda that morning. They'd all decided they were going to be proudly Keith and Linda. Good. And I said, is this the production team pulling your leg? And they...
Yeah, but I think
it was our viewers taking it on the chin.
It's a great thing. They keep mentioning GB News on the main show on ITV, which has the highest ratings. I think it's good. And the more Ant and Dec say that, the more people are going to watch
But
GB
have you
News.
noticed they've stopped saying that? And I've also noticed that it feels like they're not giving Nigel as much airtime, because I think that's how I feel. I'm watching it and I'm like, it took ages yesterday for them to even feature him.
Yeah, I don't think it's going the way ITV thought it was going to go, and I think that they could see that Nigel is actually really popular.
He's a nice person.
But the more Nigel people saw, the more they'd be put off him. And, you know, I disagree with Nigel politically on pretty much everything, but he's always been charming. When I worked at the BBC years ago, he was always very, very charming to people whose views were clearly not his own. And that comes through.
Do you know what?
And let's face it, Gen Z don't have the, you know, don't know how to just behave with people.
They don't know how to
do you know what I loved about Nigel? When the pans weren't cleaned properly, he went back down and went, these aren't cleaned properly. Who knew?
And about the rubbish.
I know, he's so good. I wish he lived with me. It'd be great. He'd be cleaning all... but I have to say, he's a real good sport.
Yeah.
He's up for all the challenges. He's entertaining. He's everything everyone wants to watch. And he's going to reach out to a whole new audience. And let me tell you, he's going to come back with a bang into politics when he's out.
Do you think?
Yes, I know.
You know. Listen,
I know. I was last to see him before he got the plane, and I know he's gonna save the Tory party, Conservatives. Yes.
Well,
he
listen,
is.
my daughter, who's 14, she saw it and she goes, "Oh, Nigel's really sweet."
Yeah.
These are the youngsters, the teenagers are taking him in and thinking, actually. What he's doing is enabling a conversation. You don't have to agree with him.
No, but you have to be able to have...
But you have to be able to have a
Nana
conversation.
just tries to close everything down, and that's the big difference.
But there was one thing where she did say, let's agree to disagree.
Yeah,
so
just about it.
I'll commend
But
her
poor
on that.
Fred, can we have a word for poor Fred?
No, but poor Fred the Remainer. I mean, I couldn't believe... I mean, I didn't like him at the beginning when he went on about Brexit straight away. He had that all written, you know, ready for Nigel.
I'm in need of love.
But he really didn't mean to upset Noella. And this is what I hate, as you say, that woke brigade, you know, don't offend us. You know, I'm sorry, just because you're offended
but
doesn't
nobody's
make
ever
you
good
right.
enough. I mean, like, Fred, who's pretty woke and he's a Remainer and, you know, and all this. He's not woke enough. He obviously, you know... I mean, of course, it's fine. We're all sensitive about things in our past. You know, my mum died a few years ago. She used to love the Christmas windows on Oxford Street. I was just thinking about them as I was going past earlier. But it doesn't mean that you cancel somebody because that you have a conversation. And that's what I worry, that people who just spend their life with their phone in front of them making themselves a star.
But she said she wasn't going to eat any of his food. I don't know. I thought to myself, why starve yourself? That's not very clever.
She's going on a hunger strike.
That's really cutting off your nose to spite.
But this is what I hate about the woke nonsense, and it is madness. And I think people can see that it is now. They're actually watching it, going, "What is this about?" Honestly, it really is dumb. And you know what? I really am rooting for Nigel. I'm so proud of him. He's doing so well.
And I would just say, I mean, one thing is about politicians who go on shows like this. People attack politicians, but one thing politicians know about is how to talk to different people, including about politics. Because if you're a politician, you meet endless voters, you knock on doors, and you might find somebody who knows an awful lot, is very interested, or somebody who really doesn't give a you-know-what. And therefore, you have to get on with a huge range of people. That is part of the job, whether you like it or not. And that's why wherever the party the politician's from, whether you like their politics or not, they do tend to know how to get on with people, because that's, you know, that's their core skill base.
And who would have thought he could eat kangaroo testicle without even a blink of the eye?
Would you two do it?
No.
Oh, I would definitely put worse in my mouth.
Nana, before the watershed. Nana, can we get her on? off. I mean, we're going to trouble.
No, I love the show. I've always loved the show, but this year, I wish you had. You could have booked me in.
Series, I
but look, I really think Nigel's going to win it,
Well, I
and
think
I'm glad. And he's reaching out to a whole new audience, which is fantastic.
But he's not really getting voted for the trials. But then I think before being voted for the trial was because people think that you're awful and they want you to do it. But then I think Nigel wants to be voted for the trial, but perhaps not this next one, because that's the drinking of horrible stuff.
That is the drinking. But as he said, you get more TV time.
More TV
that's
time.
what it's about.
Well, there you go. So what do you think? Are you watching Nigel in the Jungle? Do you think Nella Rose is a bit Gen Z, or do you think she's got a point? I mean, she did say we can agree to disagree, which I've got to commend her on that. But listen, if you just tuned in, it's coming up to 18 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Coming up, we'll round up with Angela Levin. She'll be here to give us the latest from behind the palace walls. But up next, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is the hostage deal a major victory for Israel? A truce between the IDF and Hamas has been agreed, and some hostages have been released, with more expected to be reunited with their families over the weekend. But have Hamas gained an upper hand in the conflict? I've got a poll up right now on X asking you that very question. Is the hostage deal a major victory for Israel? Send me your thoughts, email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnews. Cast your vote now.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akua, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet?
What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you just tuned in, welcome on board. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. It's just coming up to 23 after 4. I'm Nana Akua. Now, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, is the hostage deal a major victory for Israel? 13 Israeli hostages have been freed today. That was in exchange for 42 Palestinian prisoners. Now, this marks the second day of their pause in the fighting across the Gaza Strip. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is the hostage deal a major victory for Israel or perhaps for Hamas? Well, I'm joined now by Emma Webb, she's the Director of Common Sense, Gary Mond, founder of the National Jewish Society, Con Coughlin, he's a defence editor for The Telegraph, and Will Geddes, a security expert. Will Geddes, I'm going to start with you.
Well, I don't think it is, Nana. I think it's a pretty poor deal, to be honest, because we're looking at 3 Palestinian hostages, or if you like, prisoners, that are being exchanged for Israeli citizens. These are Israeli citizens. The Palestinians are all convicted criminals, and these are not simply women and children. These are individuals that have been interned for crime against Israel, and whether that be the facilitation of terrorism acts or whether it be random violence against Israelis. So I think this 3-to-1 ratio, it doesn't cut for me, and it also works into Hamas having this ceasefire, which gives them a chance to regroup. It heeds, obviously, the Israeli counter-offensive, and fundamentally, it's going to be difficult to maintain momentum for this conflict from the Israel side and to try and eliminate Hamas.
Well, Con Coughlin.
Well, I agree with every word Will said, actually. I would add to that you know, we've had a principle in the West going back 40 years or so that you do not negotiate with terrorists. And here we are. The US has sanctioned this deal. The US put pressure on Israel to accept this deal. Nobody in Israel, certainly the Israeli government, wants this deal. They want to carry on with their military offensive to destroy Hamas. So, and then you just have to look that these celebrations were taking place in the West Bank when these Palestinian, as Will said, these convicted terrorists are released. You've got pro-Hamas demonstrations taking place. So, to me, it's an enormous own goal.
You think? But, I mean, the hostages wouldn't think that. I mean, this is, in a sense... let's go to Emma Webb. Emma, there's hostages being released, so these are people's lives, and as the Israelis rightly said, these are worlds. Each person is a world within themselves. So surely there's some level of victory for Israel.
Yeah, you've seen Israelis today saying how important every life is, and every life is sacred. And so, in a sense, yes, of course, this is a victory. I mean, imagine the relief from those families who have got their children and their loved ones back in their arms again. But on the other hand, imagine the suffering of those who haven't seen their loved ones released today. There are still children, and particularly babies. There is a very, very small baby who is still being kept hostage. And the point is that Hamas are trying to inflict as much suffering on Israel as possible. They're going to draw this out. They're going to torture the Israeli people by making this as drip-fed as they possibly can. And until we see every single hostage released, every single baby, every single elderly woman, every single woman, man, child, innocent who has been taken into captivity, yes, of course, they are being exchanged, as Will said, absolutely right. They're being exchanged for those who have done horrendous things like murdering Jewish civilians. And actually, one of the organisers, one of the Hamas leaders behind the October 7th attack, was actually previously released in a hostage exchange of this kind back in 2011. So in some ways, this could be sowing the seeds of future disaster. However, importantly, there are two metrics by which a full victory will be measured. That is the complete release of all of the hostages, every last one, to ensure that Israeli citizens, and also, we should add, the citizens of Gaza, are safe from Hamas. Victory will be measured by Hamas being completely wiped out by Israel. So yes, this is a victory in one sense, but it isn't the ultimate victory.
I mean, is that even possible to completely wipe out Hamas? Gary Mond.
I too agree with almost everything that's been said. It's simply a question of whether this is a bad deal or a disastrous deal. And the answer to that question we'll see in the next couple of weeks. What has happened is that Israel's determination and ability to absolutely eradicate Hamas, which it must do, has been slowed down and maybe even put into reverse. And we will know the answer to that question in the next week or two. It's vitally important that Israel does not get distracted from its main objective, which is the eradication of Hamas. You see, there's also what has happened is Israel's objectives. There are two objectives. One is to get all the hostages free, and the other is to destroy Hamas. And to some extent, those objectives are in conflict with each other. Those who want to see all the hostages free are prepared to deal with Hamas. Those who want to see Hamas eradicated, except that tragically, some of the hostages will not make it.
I've got more faith in Israel than that, though, because I actually think that they, this has got to be a good thing that hostages are being released. A pause in the fighting may also give them a chance to regroup as well. I know this is not great with regard to their opponent, but they are now in the tunnels, aren't they? So they're in the tunnels under the hospital now. They have gone in at the stronghold or the command centre for Hamas. And in a sense, what about the lives, though, of these people who have been released, Gary? Because that's a positive thing, surely.
Of course, every life saved is positive. But the question is there's large numbers of hostages who are not going to be saved unless the Israeli army is able to get to them. Because, as was said by one of the earlier speakers, Hamas is in the business of trying to string this out as long as it possibly can.
We'll get this.
Well, I think really fundamentally it comes down to the fact that Hamas have not also released sufficient information about the other 150 odd or 190 odd hostages, which they still have. They're releasing on average about 10 a day, which is going to go over a 5-day period. So when you bear that in mind, there are 50 Israeli hostages, civilians, children, elderly people, infants, who are going to be released against 150 convicted criminals from Palestine who will be released back. And Emma made a very good point about one of the masterminds behind the attack on October the 7th was someone who was exchanged on a prisoner swap with an IDF soldier and subsequently went back to plan this attack. So I think Hamas are using this. They're trying to use the optics on a positive level. They know that they've got international support. We see this with all the pro-Palestine demonstrations and protests that are going on. And they're going to string this out for ages. This is undermining the Israelis. It's undermining Netanyahu in terms of his strategy. And it's going to make it immensely difficult because Hamas know, and let's not beat about the bush, we know that Hamas knew there was going to be retribution in the wake of their attack on October the 7th. They're going to string this out for as long as they can.
Well, that's why they took the hostages, let's be honest here. But I think on the grand scheme of things, at least some people have been released to their families, and that has got to be a good thing. Emma Webb, thank you very much, Director of Common Sense Society. Gary Mond, founder of the National Jewish Society. Con Coughlin, a defence editor for The Telegraph, and Will Geddes, security expert. Thank you very much. Well, what do you think at home? Do you think that the hostage deal is a victory for Israel? They didn't seem to think so. This is GB News on TV, online and digital radio. Coming up, we'll continue with the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is the hostage deal a major victory for Israel? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, and also former Labour advisor Matthew Laza. Still to come, this week's difficult conversation. Motivational speaker Hanan K will be live in the studio, drawing on her battle scars and struggles as she was bullied as a teenager. Hanan inspires people across the globe to embrace their beauty, no matter what form that may come in. You won't want to miss that. But first, let's get your latest news with Aaron.
Hi there, it's 4:31. Good afternoon to you. Aaron Armstrong here in the GB newsroom. Breaking news just coming into us. Hamas are delaying the second round of hostage releases until Israel commits to letting aid trucks enter northern Gaza. That is according to the Reuters news agency. Hamas have given the Israeli government a list of 13 people who'll be freed from captivity in Gaza. Egyptian authorities are waiting for their arrival at the Rafah border crossing. Clearly that will now be delayed. As part of the deal brokered by Qatar, Israel is preparing to release 39 Palestinian prisoners. It is the second of a 4-day pause in fighting. Meanwhile, Yoni Katz-Asher's been reunited with his wife Doron and his daughters Raz and Aviv. His wife and daughter spent the last 7 weeks in captivity. 24 hostages were freed yesterday. Several women and children were taken to Israel's Schneider Children's Medical Centre. Authorities say they're responding well to treatment. In London, police have arrested a protester at a pro-Palestinian march on suspicion of inciting racial hatred. Officers say he was seen carrying a placard with Nazi symbols on it. Tens of thousands of demonstrators have been calling for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. Police officers have handed out leaflets warning against using words or images that are, in the police's words, likely to land you in jail. The former Minneapolis police officer convicted in the death of George Floyd has been stabbed in prison while serving his sentence. That's according to reports in the US. 47-year-old Derek Chauvin was reportedly stabbed by another inmate at a prison in Arizona on Friday and was seriously injured. It comes days after the Supreme Court rejected his appeal. He'd argued he had not received a fair trial. And we'll be back with more at the top of the next hour with a full bulletin, or there's more right now on our website. Now, over to Nana.
Thank you, Aaron. Coming up, royal biographer Angela Devon will be live in the studio to give us the latest from behind the palace walls. In my royal roundup, we'll be discussing racism claims in a bombshell book and warning of the relationship between Catherine and Camilla. But up next, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is the hostage deal a major victory for Israel? I've got a poll up right now on X asking you that very question. Is the hostage deal a major victory for Israel? Cast your vote now.
We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GBNews.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, 37 minutes after 4 o'clock. Welcome on board. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. Don't forget as well, you can download the GB News app. I'm Nana Akua. Now, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, is the hostage deal a major victory for Israel? Now, 13 Israeli hostages are to be freed today. That's in exchange for 39 Palestinian prisoners. This marks the second day of their pause in fighting across the Gaza Strip. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is the hostage deal a major victory for Israel? Well, let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, and also former Labour advisor Matthew Laza. Matthew, I'm going to start with you.
So I think it is, yes, it's a major victory for Israel in the sense that Israel had to bring the hostages, or as many as they can, home. And thank goodness. I mean, let's just begin by saying thank goodness that so far, whether the deal's right or wrong, it's holding, and more aid is getting in and more hostages are getting out, which is absolutely essential for everybody. So the internal political pressure on Netanyahu in Israel, if he hadn't brought more hostages home, would have just been overwhelming. So yes, I think it is a victory in the sense that objective has been achieved. But I'm very worried about the next section of the conflict.
OK, Lizzie.
Well, look, there's hope. There's hope. But the fact is, I mean, look, there's three sets. We've got women and children, we've got foreign internationals, and we've got Israeli soldiers that are being held hostage. And it's a very, very sensitive time. I'm very concerned for the rest of the hostages, whether they're going to get released. I really am. And then don't forget, Hamas are terrorists. How do you negotiate with a terrorist? You can't. You can't trust them. And the fact is, let me give you some facts on the terrorist leaders.
They're a grim organisation.
Listen, the Hamas leaders are actually in Qatar, and they have personal wealth of 3.5 billion. They've got that wealth from the aid, thieving. The money should be for the Gazan Palestinian people. Sadly, they have robbed them, and this is what the worry is. And you know, how are the rest of the hostages going to be released? As I said, we've got foreign nationals there, there are Israeli soldiers there, and the proportion of what's being swapped, innocent children and the elderly for prisoners.
Yeah. Well,
are criminals.
I mean, I don't know.
It's not a fair... I mean,
I'm going to see if we can get that clip from Kay Burley earlier. I don't know whether you saw it.
No.
But we'll rustle it up in a moment and we'll show you it. But it was quite ridiculous, what she was talking about. I don't even want to repeat it. We'll play it and show you in a moment. But the others seem to think, I mean, Emma, Will and Gary, they all seem to believe, and Con seem to think, that actually this wasn't a great move at all for Israel. But surely
I think it's absolutely. I think
global pressure.
I'm not saying it's a great move. I'm saying it's a necessary move. As you say, it makes anybody very uncomfortable to be seeing innocent women and children being swapped for people who've been convicted in Israeli courts. So it's not a fair swap in any sense, but it's a necessary swap. And I think it's not only for internal Israeli issues, but also to keep that international coalition of support behind Israel, which is so necessary. It can't be just Israel and the US versus the rest. So the more aid that gets in, the more people that are fed in southern Gaza, the more I think that gives Israel the space to do what it needs to do.
But you see, we've got the marches on it again today, which I'm afraid...
When there is actually a ceasefire, so it's not even very...
They're actually they are terrifying, and we had one of our news reporters from GBNews having a terrible time out there, and I'm afraid to say they're saying ceasefire, but you've got to have ceasefire with a purpose. What is going to happen after the ceasefire, and what is going to actually happen after these days where we've got this pause? What happens after that fifth day? What happens? Because Israel's objective is to get rid of Hamas, because they are a terrorist group.
Well, listen, let me play this clip. This is Kay Burley speaking to Elon Levy. He is an Israeli spokesperson, and listen to her ridiculous question.
I was speaking to a hostage negotiator this morning. He made the comparison between the 50 hostages that Hamas has promised to release, as opposed to the 150 prisoners that are Palestinians that Israel has said that it will release. And he made the comparison between the numbers and the fact that does Israel not think that Palestinian lives are valued as highly as Israeli lives?
Well, those eyes said all. What an extraordinary question.
Well, it was just the most ridiculous question.
Well, and you saw his response. I mean,
there was a bit of his response.
What an absolutely daft question. I mean, clearly, it's actually the reverse. I mean, you can argue, I don't think it's correct, but the reverse of it, because obviously the numbers are being demanded by Hamas. They're not being set by the Israelis. And I'm sure that Hamas asked for 500 to start with, and then in the negotiations with the government of Qatar brokered, that came down to it. So to say that, it's just, that's just, I'm shocked. I didn't see it because I wasn't watching that channel.
I'm sorry, but it's actually insulting. It really is insulting, I'm afraid to say. And I don't know what she was thinking with saying that. Crazy. I really don't. Absolutely insulting. But what I want to say is after this pause, what is going to happen? And in this pause, which I've been told, Hamas are regrouping. They're trying to get vehicles and aid through with weapons. And, that's only making Hamas stronger, is this pause. This is the problem. So, how is this ever going to get sorted?
I think you say that, but I suppose in some respects, yes, I get it that Hamas might try and regroup in this time, but in a way it will hopefully make Israel stronger as well, because the world will be sort of more behind them in a way. I mean, we have to think about the humanitarian consequences.
I think that's absolutely key now.
Oh, without a doubt.
The Palestinian people in Gaza, there will be many who don't support Hamas. And let's be honest, if you're in that environment, you're not going to say anything because otherwise you're next. They don't care. I saw this awful thing in the West Bank where they had some people who they put on some electric poles and all. It was absolutely horrendous. No, so I think that actually if you're there, you can't really speak out anyway. And so I think a pause, it has to stop at some point.
But we must remember, on that dreadful day in October, Hamas knew what they were doing.
Oh, yeah.
And they kidnapped the hostages internationally. Thailand have already done a deal with them to have theirs released first. It was an international butchery, but it was. That's why. It's been forgotten, and that's what we can never ever forget.
Well, look, and as Israel rightly said, that every person who is released is that they're a world. They've got a whole world of people around them, and they are a world. And so I'm glad they have been released. But this show's nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome our great British voice, their opportunity to be on the show and tell us what they really think about the topics we're discussing. Should we go to Bristol? Yeah, I love that. My map is back. Let's see Lee Harris. Lee, did you see the map?
I did see the map. It's back.
It's back. The map is back. We're all happy, but it's a slightly longer... I mean, if I have one criticism of the map, it does start too far away. Whinge too much.
It's like when you wrote in your school book, isn't it? Bristol, England, the universe.
Right. So what do you think, Lee? Is this a major victory or a major win? I mean, you can't... It's all awful, but on the grand scheme of things, is this a positive move for Israel?
Yeah, I agree with the panel, and I agree with Matthew for a change. Being able to get any of the innocent civilians, which, as we know, include elderly women and children, and 240 hostages that are being held by this barbaric, difficult Hamas, is definitely a good thing. But it is desperately unfair that Israel had to release 150 violent criminals in return for 50 women and children. But I do understand why they're trying to do everything they can to bring these hostages home. So this is a victory for Israel in that sense, and it's definitely a victory for the small number of families who've had their loved ones returned. But it's far from over, and there is no doubt that Hamas are also benefiting from this pause in military action. So this will have negative consequences for Israel's effort to wipe Hamas out. But as we know, these evil terrorists are still holding around 200 innocent civilians who are ripped away from their families and homes during the most barbaric massacre against Jewish people since the Holocaust. They kidnapped a 9-month-old baby who became...
It's ridiculous. Yeah. Well, what does a 9-month? It's ridiculous. What has a 9-month-old baby ever done to them? It's absurd. The whole thing is just an absolute nonsense, and it's terrifying for all of us. Actually, when you imagine that they literally went into people's homes and massacred them, and we don't want people like that. We don't want people like that around. Lee Harris, thank you so much. Really good to talk to you. Thank you so much. And I think, in respect, Israel are right. They do need to root out that. We cannot have that kind of behaviour on this planet. We cannot have people behaving in that way and that being acceptable. We'll keep your thoughts coming as ever. GBviews@gbnews.com. I'll read some of them when we come back. But on the way next at 5, it's this week's difficult conversation. TV personality Hanan K. Now, she's been living with polycystic ovarian syndrome and has excess body hair. Now, she has hair on her face as well. She's been living like that as well. She'll be joining me and speaking about the bullying that she's had to endure. But first, let's get some weather.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. It is staying on the cold side as we move through the rest of the weekend, frost returning tonight, but we will have rain moving in from the Atlantic, and we can see that on the bigger picture. High pressure moves away as we head through into the second half of the weekend, replaced by low pressure bringing outbreaks of rain. Turning chilly this evening for many areas as skies clear, temperatures will tumble away. However, into the early hours, thicker cloud will move into the far west. Outbreaks of rain moving into parts of Northern Ireland. Some mist and fog patches ahead of the rain, and temperatures, well, towns and cities close to freezing, below freezing in the countryside. -4 or -5 Celsius is possible, but it means a sunny start with those fog patches still around first thing further north and east. Thicker cloud in the west, outbreaks of rain moving in, and this slowly pushing its way eastwards through the day. Best of the sunshine holding on across parts of Scotland, thicker cloud developing elsewhere, and the wind's just starting to increase across the far southwest as mild air approaches here, 11 or 12 Celsius, but elsewhere, cold day once more, 4 or 5 degrees at best. Into Monday, that low pressure is still around, giving outbreaks of showery rain across England and Wales in particular, some heavy bursts possible. Brighter skies for Northern Ireland and Scotland, but it's quite windy across some eastern coasts. And it stays unsettled as we move through this week with further outbreaks of rain and temperatures on the cold side.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akua, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
53 minutes after 4 o'clock. If you've just tuned in, where have you been? It's all right, don't worry, you've got just over an hour left, so it's fine. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, there's always something going on in the royal household, and this week has been no different. On the menu, Meghan Markle. Now, she has claimed that there are not one, but two royal racists, who discussed Archie's skin colour. That's according to a new book. Well, you think she could have said so at the time. But why do the Sussexes still want to get close to the royal family, seeing as they hate it so much? Also, the warm relationship between Camilla and Catherine seems to be growing in different ways. And Princess Eugenie's new claim from her appearance on the podcast that the royal family are brought up not to overshare. Maybe Harry and Meghan should be taking some notes. And every Saturday, I love to give you a rundown, and who better to do so than royal biographer Angela Levin. She wrote Prince Harry's biography, did you know?
And Camilla's.
And Camilla's as well.
Yes.
You get around, Angela.
I do.
So what should we start with? Meghan Markle. Now, she says there's not one but two, apparently. Now, this is according to a new book.
You have to say that, yes, according to the new book, but she is now saying that she's had nothing whatsoever to deal with it. But that's what they said last time with the first book, and she had to go to court and apologise because she had done. So I don't believe that they haven't controlled this new book, Omid Scobie, and a lot of it is their wish to be horrendous but pretend it's not them. I think if you look back on how they behave, that's how they behave. Well, the thing that there's two people, first of all, is like saying anything. I mean, I've got friends opposite me who actually all got 3 children, one's mixed, one's white, one's not white, and they discuss it a lot. Which one doesn't mean that you're anti-people who are black or brown or anything. You're just talking about it. You could say, are they going to have orange hair? Are they going to have, brown eyes? It's not anything like that. But Meghan has made it grow.
Well, she wasn't even there, though, was she, when the comment was made?
No, I think she was there for the second one because it's not necessarily a royal. But actually, in the beginning of 23, Harry was interviewed for his book, Spare, and he said that she didn't say anything about them being racist. It said it was unconscious bias, whatever that means.
That's right, it wasn't a racist.
And it wasn't racist at all.
Remember.
So we have this swap, which is what goes on all the time. And in a way, this is what's happening about we do want to come over for Christmas and we don't want to come over for Christmas. Because if you know what's coming up, and this book would have been what they knew, why would you want to go there? She doesn't. It's said in the book that she absolutely can't bear the royal family and the way the royal operate, and she doesn't want to know about it. This is typical Meghan, because she uses people until she doesn't need them anymore, and then she moves on. She did this with her first husband, she's done it with lots of friends, and that's how she operates. And it's cunning.
But she's not unique to operating in that manner. A lot of people operate like that, quite ruthless people, actually. And out of it, she's bagged herself a prince.
Yes, and she's hanging on to his title. She wants that very much so. And, of course, if she hadn't done that, she hadn't hung on to a prince, she wouldn't be popular and she wouldn't be incredibly rich. So it's worked for her. But does she want to come here to this country?
No, of course.
Of course not. But does Harry? He said that he feels very sorry for his brother and his father because they're trapped.
Oh,
he doesn't want anything to do with it. So now he's suddenly swapped and he will forgive them and move on. So the whole thing is just a mess. And I hope that the king won't have them over, because anything he said is going to be spilled out into books and magazines. And
this particular book, what's it called? This is Obid's. I mean, I call him Scooby-Doo, but Lady Colin Campbell calls him Scabies.
Yes, that's quite a good one. Something end, isn't it? What is it now?
There's something like, what is it called? I can't remember the book now. What's it called?
Yeah, I'll look it up.
It's that memorable. We've forgotten.
Yes, Endgame.
Endgame.
And I wonder if it's his endgame, because I don't think anybody will want to speak to him afterwards. It's really nasty and unpleasant.
I hope nobody buys it, just because I think some of these tell-all memoirs, I think some of them they're starting to have a shelf life, and people are going off the notion that somebody will do a tell-all memoir about something like the royal family. I've heard enough.
Yes, I think people are fed up with the same old moaning. It's yet again moaning and moaning and moaning. And what he said about Catherine, that she's lazy and she's jealous of Meghan. This woman is not jealous of Meghan.
Why would she be jealous of Meghan?
Well, because Meghan is cleverer and more beautiful and all that sort of stuff. She's got very close to Camilla, which is very interesting. Camilla tried to help her when she joined the royal family, because she's had difficult experience when she joined, and Catherine was very, very grateful for that. They went for lunch and she often took her daughter, and she told her all the sorts of things she could do and couldn't do. And now they've got a really good relationship. You could see at the last event that she wore red when they met people, and Camilla was in blue, and then when it was the main meal, Camilla was in red and she was in white. They're working things out very well. And also when they do books, Camilla's got a book club, and Catherine does the children's book. She chooses children's books, and they've got that. They also go out to see art, because William's not terribly interested in that. They go and do that. So they're building up a gentle...
Very briefly, though, we've got about 30 seconds, on Princess Eugenie. They've been brought up to not to overshare.
Yes, she put a podcast, and she said she was brought up not to share. And I think that's a very good thing for the royal family. Overshare, yes, because they don't have to know everything about you. But, of course, Meghan and Harry want to pour everything onto the press and blame the press for then being nuisance.
Well, they need to make money, Angela, because they've got nothing left. I mean, I don't see much talent that way. Angela Levinetova, thank you so much. This is GBNews. Stay tuned. More to come in the next hour. Good afternoon. It's just coming up to 5 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. For the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. Coming up, This week's difficult conversation, I'll be joined by Guinness World Record holder Hanan K, who's living with polycystic ovarian syndrome and excess body hair, and calling on everyone to embrace their beauty no matter what form that may come in. Then, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, David Cameron says that Britain needs closer ties with the EU. Do you agree? Send me your thoughts, gbviews@gbnews.com. But first, let's get your latest news headlines with Aaron.
Very good evening to you. It's 5 o'clock. Aaron Armstrong here in the GB newsroom. The breaking news this afternoon, this evening, Hamas are delaying the second round of hostage releases until Israel commits to letting aid trucks enter northern Gaza. That's according to the Reuters news agency. Hamas earlier gave the Israeli government a list of 13 people to be freed from captivity in Gaza. Egyptian authorities have been waiting for their arrival at the Rafah border crossing. Now, as part of the deal brokered by Qatar, Israel agreed to release 39 Palestinian prisoners. It is the second of a 4-day pause in fighting, and it's not clear at the moment how long this delay will last. Meanwhile, a 4-year-old girl released yesterday after being held captive by Hamas told her father she dreamed of coming home. Raz Asher, her 2-year-old sister Aviv, and her mother Doron were reunited with Yoni Asher on Friday. It was the first stage of the Israel-Hamas deal. They were held captive for 7 weeks. 24 hostages were released in total. Authorities say they're responding well to medical treatment, and the director of paediatrics at one hospital, Gilad Livni, hopes all hostages will be returned.
We're very exciting from the first moment. We saw the kids and their parents, the hugs and the crying, and it was very, very exciting for all of us. They are in good condition, and they are surrounded by our multidisciplinary teams, social workers, psychologists, nurses, and doctors. They are surrounded by the family, friends.
In London, police have arrested a protester at a pro-Palestinian march on suspicion of inciting racial hatred. Officers say he was seen carrying a placard with Nazi symbols on it. Tens of thousands of demonstrators have been calling for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. Police earlier handed out leaflets warning against using words or images that are, in their words, likely to land you in jail. Around 1,500 officers have been deployed for the protests today. Ismail Patel from Friends of Al-Aqsa, that's a group that campaigns for Palestinian rights, told GB News what they're hoping to achieve.
We're here today to highlight that a pause in the ceasefire does not mean freedom for the Palestinian people. We need to make sure there's a total ceasefire, an end to siege and an end to occupation. And our achievement really is to make sure that our government understands this and they enforce upon the Israelis to end the bombardment and the genocide that is taking place in Gaza.
Russia's hit Kyiv with the biggest drone attack of the conflict so far. That's according to Ukraine's Air Force. At least 5 people were injured when the Shahed drones descended on the capital overnight. Explosions could be heard across the city as they were intercepted. Buildings were damaged across multiple districts. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has described the strikes as an act of willful terror. The former police officer convicted of murdering George Floyd has been stabbed at a prison in Arizona. That's according to reports in the US. It's understood Derek Chauvin survived the attack by another inmate on Friday, but has been seriously injured. It comes days after the Supreme Court rejected his appeal. The 47-year-old argued he hadn't received a fair trial. Mr. Chauvin serving multiple sentences for George Floyd's death in 2020, which led to widespread protests against police brutality and racism. And tonight's expected to be the coldest of the autumn season so far, with sub-zero temperatures across large parts of the country. It comes after many areas experienced their first frost of the year, with temperatures well below freezing. Across northwestern England and in the south, temperatures could dip to -7. Rural parts of Wales could reach as low as -4. The Met Office says snow could also fall in some parts next week. And London's traditional Christmas tree has been chosen. It's standing an impressive 62 feet tall. Norway's customary Christmas gift to the UK has been fell ahead of its trip to the capital. It grew in Nordmarka, that's in Forest just north of Oslo, and be loaded onto a ship bound for British shores. The tree will arrive in central London next week, with the festive lights being switched on the 7th of December. The Norwegian spruce is sent every year as a token of thanks for Britain's support during the Second World War. Well, this is GB News. We're on TV, on digital radio and on your smart speaker too. That's it for the moment. Now back to Nana.
Thank you, Aaron. Good afternoon. This is coming up to 6 minutes after 5 o'clock. If you just joined me, welcome. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News, live on TV, online and on digital radio. For the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, and also former Labour Party advisor Matthew Larser. Still to come, my difficult conversation. Now today, Hanan K is a TV personality and a motivational speaker who is living with polycystic ovarian syndrome. She'll be speaking to me on the bullying that she endured when she was younger and her mission to change the world, starting with oneself. Then, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, David Cameron says that Britain needs closer ties with the EU. Do you agree? The former Prime Minister, who ran away after Brexit, turned Foreign Secretary, says Britain needs to work more closely with Brussels on international and defence policy. But he has faced a backlash for reigniting the Brexit debate. So I'm asking, as David Cameron says Britain needs closer ties, do you agree? As ever, you can get in touch, email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at GBNews. 7 minutes after 5 o'clock, and it's time for this week's difficult conversation. Hanan K suffers from a hormonal imbalance which causes excessive hair growth. Age 16, she decided to embrace her body and refused to use hair removal products. Now, the resulting self-love brought a positive change to her life, which she now shares with the world in the form of education, public speaking and modelling. And I'm delighted to say that motivational speaker and Guinness World Record holder Hanan K is here in the studio. Now, Hanan, thank you very much for joining me. If I said your name right?
No, you're good. Oh, do you know what? I tell people you have to roll your R's like Cardi B. Hanan K, yeah.
Hanan K.
You're good.
Thank you. I love it. And people will look at you and say you're beautiful. I mean, for those on radio, Hanan is stunning. But you have a beard, and people will say, why?
Weird, right?
Yeah, you're gorgeous. Why don't you get rid of it?
Wow. See, I get a lot of comments, you know, oh, you know, she shaves her legs and her arms, but she can't shave her beard. But actually, the thing is I used to. I used to wax, tweeze, thread, everything under the sun. I was way too young to get laser treatment at that point. I was 16. And I realised I could keep removing and go through laser and electrolysis, you know, as I'm of age. But it's not going to undo the hormonal imbalance that I have, you know? So it's like, what am I fighting against? I'm going to be fighting against the natural way that my body is forming. So even if I do get laser, that's not sorting out or going to the root cause of the problem.
Will it remove the hair, though, and stop it from growing from around your face?
The laser will. I think it might decrease it, but I have an excess level of androgen in my body, which causes, you know, the hirsutism. And South Asians, we're quite hirsute anyway. And then I have polycystic ovarian syndrome on top of that, which 1 in 10 women just in the UK have. And it's the leading cause of infertility amongst women and the leading endocrine condition amongst us as well. So, yeah, it's not as rare as I thought when I was first diagnosed.
There'll be a lot of people looking at you wishing that hair would grow like that on their heads.
Right.
What's your hair like underneath? You're wearing... Is this turban?
My turban,
What's your hair like underneath? Is it really long as well? I bet you've got stunning hair as well.
Well, do you know what? My hair's just up to my chest. Wow. Yeah, I used to... My mum used to oil my hair every single day when I was younger, so it used to come down all the way to my knees. But this condition impacts, you know, with your hair up here as well. So, you know, it's thinned and things like that.
OK, so what happens on the top is that the hair goes thinner, but
yes.
Then you've got the excess hair here.
Weird, right?
Yeah.
So imagine what happens to men when they have testosterone. But then imagine that happening on, in a woman's body, so the male pattern baldness, you know, but we're able to grow a beard. It's weird how this condition,
So talk to me about the condition then, because I've heard it so many times. I don't really get what it is. I hear and I think, it sounds something to do with the ovaries. I don't. What is it? What's happening and what does it mean to you? And I hear obviously things. You seem to have like a propensity to your body's more male in terms of hair and things like that.
So born woman, raised a woman, very proud to be a woman. The only thing is I have an imbalance of hormones.
Right.
It's not something that I can physically. Obviously, there's medication I can take, and I'm on all the medication that I can possibly be on to correct, you know, what's happened to my body. But the condition itself, there's no cure for it. The side effects, such as the irregular periods, the weight gain, the insulin resistance, the hirsutism, these things we can actually medicate and sort out. But the condition itself, there's no cure. So with me, I have cysts in my ovaries.
Right.
That is causing a lack of ovulation, which is going to then sort of stop me from having my menstrual cycle. I'm very lucky I'm on the medication, so I get them every month. But again, it's the reasons why a lot of women can't actually conceive. Not just that, but it impacts your mental well-being and your emotional stability as well, because once those hormones are up and down and in disarray, I mean, you can imagine what it's like just menstruating once a month. Your hormones are up and down anyway, but imagine living with something like that. It's a chronic illness and it impacts your quality of life and everything about you.
And how do you... Obviously, you have the external effects so people can see, but there'll be people who don't have that degree of it. So how do you know that you've got this condition?
Oh, wow. So the first thing is, what are your periods like?
Yeah.
You know? What's your health like? Are you having gut issues? That's big. Is your body having some sort of inflammation issues? Are you having issues with getting pregnant? Are you gaining weight, you know? And we tend to gain weight a lot around the midsection, around our ovaries, around our main organs, and it's scary, you know? And it's hard for us to lose weight as well, because where we have the insulin resistance and then the glucose is not being utilised within our body, so we're packing on the weight,
What is insulin resistance for this?
Insulin resistance is where your body stops working with the insulin that your pancreas is creating to bring the sugar or the glucose down within your body. So imagine you're on a diet or a nutrition plan that's just high in sugar. There's only so much that the insulin, which is a hormone that your pancreas creates, can do. So it gets to a point where it just stops working or it resists to work. So it's not bringing the sugar levels down. That will then increase your androgen level, and that will, you know, you will pack on weight that way.
Wow. But you've not put on weight.
I've lost... I used to hit 100 kg. I've lost a lot of weight, so now
I don't even know what that is. What's that in stone?
Oh, God. I think it's hitting nearly 200 pounds.
What's that in stone, though?
I have no idea.
100 grams must be about, I don't know, 14, 15...
I don't know, but
15,
I'm glad I'm not there.
16 stone.
I'm just glad I'm not there,
wow, you've really come down. You must be size 10, I'd say.
No, I'm still... I'm still size 16, which is... Yeah.
Where's it gone? You're hiding it.
That's the thing, yeah.
You're hiding it.
I dress really well. You'll never see it. It's the way I've crossed my legs. You can't see the belly fat. But, yeah, it's always situated there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's tough, isn't it? And you say there's drugs that help to counteract it. So for women who don't have the signs, so, you know, she has the hair and things like that, but others, you need to sort of look at their periods and see what's going on. And so obviously for you, because you have the actual effects of it, when did that start happening? Was that when
wow. Imagine I hit puberty at a very young age. I was in year 6. So
how old are you then?
Oh, God, what, like 10 hitting 11?
Oh,
yeah,
wow,
very young.
Yeah.
I'm 33 in 4 days. So I'm just a bit like, come on, I've had it for 2 decades nearly. I'm done with it now, you know? But, yeah, I didn't realise that I had facial hair until I started being bullied for having facial hair. Because the women in my family... It's normal, you know, like the arm hair or a little bit here. So I didn't realise that it was an issue until I started being bullied for it. And, you know, I went to the salons and I got the the waxing done, the shaving done, etc.
Oh, such a hassle. Though.
It came back with a vengeance, and not just that, but where they didn't pull the skin to like get the wax off, my face used to sag. Like wrinkly, sag, the skin was torn, it was red, blotchy, bloodied, yeah. So I was just like, I can't do this, yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't blame you, I don't.
So imagine just waxing your arms, but imagine doing it to your face, and at a young age as well, like I was a young teen, yeah, it's hard.
So what about relationships? It must be difficult.
Very difficult, I won't lie. You know, the decisions you make in life come with consequences. And me saying, do you know what, I'm sick and tired of fighting my own body, I'm just going to keep it. You know, one of the consequences was that it was hard for me to find a regular sort of job, you know? It's hard for me to find a partner or then get married, because I understand it's not a preference, you know? You don't go on Tinder and think, oh, I'm looking for a bearded lady. It's just not a guy's preference. And I don't hold that against men because I understand, you know? So where there are certain things in life that I wanted to achieve, I can't. But again, that's a consequence of, you know, just one of the things.
Are you in a relationship?
No, I wish I was. Just me and my 2 dogs and my family, mum, dad and brother.
The dogs love you.
Love my dogs, yes.
They don't care. They don't care about
No, they're as hairy as me anyway.
So what's your aim then? What's your goal now?
My aim is to do further research into PCOS. There are a lot of women struggling with it, and unfortunately, there are going to be young girls just like me that have no idea what it is. I thought I was just dying of a very rare disease, and now all these celebrities are coming out with it. Oh, I have PCOS, and I thought, well, no one was speaking about it when I was young. So now that I have a platform, and as a motivational speaker, I think it would be a real injustice if you stop now. So the next thing for me to do is go into PCOS research facilities, because there are some, and actually see what research is being done, and come back to the public and relay the information that I have, but in very simple terms. I'm sorry, there's a lot of scientific jargon that I just do not understand. So I want to look into the deeper research that's being done behind it.
Do you have a website or somewhere people can go to find out more from you?
All my socials, just my name. My website is my name as well, Hanan K, yeah.
Lovely.
Find me.
Find her, Hanan K. I've got it.
I love that.
Thank you so much for coming to talk to us about it. A lot of people, you know, don't understand the condition, and I'm sure you've shed quite a bit of light on it.
Thank you.
So thank you, we appreciate that. That's Hanan K. Hanan K. You try it at home. Go on, see if you can do it. I'm Nana Akua. This is GBNews. She's a motivational speaker, fabulous woman. Thank you very much. That was Difficult Conversations. Can't say the word. Coming up next, my great British debate this hour. I'm asking, David Cameron says Britain needs closer ties with the EU. But do you agree? We'll be discussing that next.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon. 21 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Welcome on board. If you've just joined me, it's time now for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is David Cameron right to say that Britain needs closer ties with the EU? Aren't we close enough? According to the Foreign Secretary, Britain needs to work more closely with Brussels on international and defence policy, calling the bloc a friend, a neighbour and a partner. Well, that's not what they thought about us when we decided to leave, and it was he who ran away. Lord Cameron has faced an instant backlash from Tory MPs who have warned him against reigniting the Brexit debate, of which he found himself on the losing side. So I'm asking, because he lost, he didn't get what he wanted, that's why he quit. So I'm asking, as David Cameron says Britain needs closer ties with the EU, do you agree? So joining me to debate this, Stephen Pound, former Labour MP, Dennis McShane, former Minister for the State of Europe, Belinda de Lucy, former Brexit Party MEP. But I'm going to start with you, DM. I call him Danger Mouse. Dennis McShane, watch out. Dennis. Is he right?
Oh, it's wonderful. I sent that speech in to David. I didn't really think he was going to use it, but I'm very glad he has. I mean, what's he playing at? I mean, he's taking the Michael royally, isn't he? He took us out of Brexit. He's called Lord Brexit in Europe. He broke all links with European Conservative centre-right parties in 2009 before he became PM. Didn't do anything to negotiate intelligently and lumbered us then with the charms of Theresa May, Boris Johnson, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak.
So many.
He really is taking the PISS.
Well, but then he ran away, though, didn't he?
He did.
He ran away after the vote, which he didn't get what he wanted, and now he's back telling us how we should have closer ties on it. But Dennis, ultimately, do you think that he's right that we need closer ties with the EU? That's the question.
We need better ties with everybody, and certainly the cutting of the links for the last nearly 8 years with our prime trade partners has cost England, Britain very dearly. Our young people can't travel, they can't find work. It's nuts. And sooner or later, all the opinion polls are now saying that. He's in tune with the opinion polls, but nobody's going to trust him or Rishi Sunak or any of those sort of anti-European Tories to do anything to
or Keir Starmer.
Relation. Well, we'll wait and see on Sir Keir, but we do need a change of government, whatever happens to her.
Well, I'm going to go straight to Belinda de Lucy.
It's total codswallop that young people can't travel in the EU or work if they fill out the right forms. So that's not quite true.
Form filling.
Look, oh gosh, I mean, as if democracy isn't worth a few form filling minutes. What I would say is this. There's no problem being neighbourly or friendly with the EU if they are friendly and respectful to us. It's the ties, closer ties. There's no such thing as ties, it's chains. It's a stone around our neck of democracy, having any cooperation with the EU. because all they want is you give them an inch, they'll take a mile. And unfortunately, my concern with the sort of arch Remainers back in power in our government, like Cameron and Hunt, is that fundamentally they believe that selling off democratic agency of the British electorate is worth a few travel and trade perks for a minority of people in this country who can use them. And I don't trust our sovereignty in the hands of them, because all they want to do is impress their chums on the international stage anyway.
Nicely put, Belinda. Stephen Pound.
Good afternoon, Nana. Apparently, I hear from a reliable source that when he was getting fitted up for his title for the House of Lords, somebody suggested that he take the title of the ancestral home of the Cameron clan, which is Blairmore Castle. And apparently somebody said, should it be more Blair rather than Blair Moore? And I think this is the difficulty here. A lot of people like me who are passionately pro-European, but above all, we're Democrats, and we know that the people have spoken, and we can't undo that. We can't unpick the omelette. But the reality is that if he thinks he can have a Trojan horse and get us back into Europe through the back door, then he is not only profoundly mistaken, but he is profoundly anti-democratic.
Because I think sometimes, Stephen, they think that we're a bit stupid and that we can't understand
Nobody
what
would
he's
ever
saying.
make that assumption about you, Nana.
I don't think he
They'd
would.
be too
I don't think
terrified.
he would dare allow me to interview him, but I would like it if you could. David, if you're watching, we'd love to hear your views, because you did run away after Brexit when you didn't get what you wanted. But does it not feel to you, Stephen, I mean, maybe he's trying to get what he didn't get before and trying to bring us back into the EU, which is, I think, what a lot of people are worried about?
Well, I mean, I think Dennis is right. We need all the friends we can get. I'm quite happy to talk to people. We get Kemi Badenoch, who's talking about doing deals with Vietnam and Ecuador and, important places like that. I'm quite happy with that. But the reality is, if he thinks that he can actually build a Trojan horse and get us back into Brussels and Strasbourg that way, then I'm sorry, but, that is not on. It is simply anti-democratic. It is not the way we do things in this country. And you simply cannot reverse the decision that, in my opinion, the unhappy decision of June 2016.
Dennis, how much closer can we get to them anyway? Because he's talking about closer ties. What do you think he actually means by that? Because that's quite a broad brush. It's a broad term, isn't it? Closer ties.
I mean, to be fair, to be serious for half a second, he was talking about defence security. He said Britain is a European power. I don't think even Tony Blair used that kind of hubristic language, and that we have done the most for Ukraine. That is just garbage. All we've done for Ukraine is send people like Liz Truss, Boris Johnson and now David Cameron for photo opportunities in Kyiv. We sent some weapons, but Germany sent far more. The Americans have sent most, and the American arms industry is coining in the profits.
But didn't it take Germany... Now, hold on, you said Germany sent far more. Didn't, at one point, they'd only sent some hats and things like that?
No.
I mean, people were complaining that Germany hadn't sent
to begin with, you're quite right. Big change of mind, and called the Titanwende in German, and now the Leopard tanks are rolling there. The stats say, after America, Germany's the single biggest supplier of help, military help.
Well, eventually,
No, it took time. We talked a big talk. We trained a lot of soldiers. The army's been very good. But the main thing we've said is shoulder-held anti-tank missiles, which are made in Belfast, hooray, but by a French company. Thank God for France saving the British arms industry.
Well, at least we were one of the quickest to get there. Belinda de Lucy, do you think that what he's talking about is some sort of scary way of trying to get us back into the EU? Do you think that's where he's going with this?
Well, it's just that the sort of trust has been broken, I think, between the Brexiteers and Remainers in cabinet, because since 2016, the Tories have been fighting within themselves about Brexit. 60% of the cabinet now voted Remain, and like Labour did in 2007, signing the Lisbon Treaty behind closed doors, a sort of repackaged EU constitution, they are always trying to slip us back in without the consent of the people. And what I worry about is that a lot of these politicians no longer really care about national applause or what we want. Their stage is the globe now. And the EU always wants something in return. It's never fair. And the EU want us back because they see us as a cash cow. So the question is, what are the conditions of us having closer ties with the EU? Any more decision-making power goes over to them, and we'll be back on the street.
Why are you laughing, Dennis?
Well, dear Belinda, the idea of Britain being a cash cow, we haven't got 2 luncheon vouchers to rub together. We're the poorest country in GDP per capita terms in the G7. I mean, they don't want us back. They now think we will be there knocking on the door saying, can we have a handout for this? Can we do levelling up with European money? Let's get it right.
Yeah,
we are not any longer the power that once we were.
Well, then answer me this. Why, within days of David Cameron coming back, did he start talking about tens of billions of dollars he was going to spend extra on foreign aid of taxpayers' money? You know, suddenly they can find money for climate this and helping other people around the world. And yet you say that we've got no money. They seem to be able to find it when they want to impress their international chums.
That was David. David Cameron is proud. One of the few things he did in a fairly disastrous premiership, he thinks, was to actually instrumentalise the idea that the churches and all sorts of outfits said 0.7% to help the poorest of the world to get a bit richer. In fact, if the poorer countries of the world were a bit richer, maybe they wouldn't send so many immigrants to us and the rest of Europe. That then was axed, of course, by Boris Johnson, because he doesn't give a monkeys about the third world.
You don't know that, Dennis. There's a lot of supposition here. You're just making stuff up now.
No. David Cameron wants to have all his old failed yesterdays back. He'd like to get us back to 0.7. Actually, there would be hosannas in every pulpit on a Sunday if any government returned to that. I don't think David's going to get Rishi Sunak. I mean, Rishi could sign the cheque personally himself. You wouldn't notice.
I've got to stop you there, Dennis. I don't know what you're talking about. Does anybody know what's going on? So finally, then, do you agree, then? David Cameron says Britain needs closer ties to the EU. Belinda de Lucy, do we, yes or no?
Definitely not, because that's not what it really means. So, no. Friendly, but no ties.
Stephen Pound.
Europe's got major problems at the moment with Geert Wilders and Giorgia Meloni. There's real problems in Europe. And I think, to be honest, this is probably not the best time to be getting back into bed with them.
Yeah, perhaps you don't tie yourself to a sinking ship. Dennis McShane.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes. Stop rubbishing Europe.
We're not rubbishing them. I'm asking a question now. I think we need new ties. Thank you very much. Belinda de Lucy, former Brexit MEP, Brexit Party MP. Also, Stephen Pound, former Labour MP, and Dennis McShane, former Minister for the State of Europe. Well, that's their thoughts. What are yours? This is GB News. Coming up, we'll continue with the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, as David Cameron says Britain needs closer ties to the EU, do you agree? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, Lizzie Cundy and Matthew Larser. But first, let's get your latest news with Aaron.
It's 5:32. Good evening. I'm Aaron Armstrong. Hamas are delaying the second round of hostage releases until Israel commits to letting aid trucks enter northern Gaza. That's according to the Reuters news agency. Earlier, Hamas gave the Israeli government a list of 13 people to be freed from captivity in Gaza. Egyptian authorities have been waiting for their arrival at the Rafah border crossing in the south of Gaza. Israel has agreed to release 39 Palestinian prisoners in exchange from this jail in the West Bank as part of the deal brokered by Qatar. It is the second of a 4-day pause in the fighting, although it is not clear at the moment how long the delay will last. Police have arrested 2 people on suspicion of supporting a prescribed terrorist organisation. Officers took the action as tens of thousands demonstrated at a pro-Palestinian march in central London. The police say one suspect was seen in Trafalgar Square wearing a green headband with white Arabic script. He had several more in his possession. Earlier, another protester was arrested on suspicion of inciting racial hatred after he was seen carrying a placard with Nazi symbols. And the former police officer convicted of murdering George Floyd has been stabbed at a prison in Arizona. That's according to reports in the United States. It's understood Derek Chauvin survived the attack by another inmate on Friday, but has been seriously injured. It comes days after the Supreme Court rejected his appeal. The 47-year-old argued he did not receive a fair trial. Well, more on all of our stories on our website, gbnews.com, where I'll be back with a full bulletin at 6 o'clock. Now, it's back to Nana.
Coming up, is the BBC right to ban Jewish staff from marching against anti-Semitism? Some of your thoughts, GBViews at gbnews.com. But up next, we'll continue with the great British debate this hour. And I'm asking, as David Cameron says Britain needs closer ties with the EU, do you agree? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, Lizzie Cundy and Matthew Larser.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akua, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet?
What is this?
It's my new
It's your new t-shirt.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
38 minutes after 5 o'clock. Welcome on board. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. Don't forget as well, you can watch us live on YouTube. Sorry, a bit of Matthew Lala appeared in the screen there. I thought to myself, get out. That's my shot.
I'm in trouble now.
You are in a lot of trouble. That's my shot, darling. Take the shot. Take the shot. Right, now it's time for the great British debate this hour, and I'm asking, David Cameron says Britain needs closer ties with the EU. Do you agree? The former Prime Minister who ran away when he didn't get what he wanted over Brexit turned Foreign Secretary says that Britain needs to work more closely with Brussels. Now, I say ran away. He didn't literally run away.
Well, pretty much.
Okay.
He legged it.
Okay, he legged it.
He kind of legged it. He certainly metaphorically legged it at speed.
Roadrunner.
He was... Oh, that's Woody Woodpecker, sorry. Right, but anyway, so he's saying basically we want more closer ties with Brussels on international and defence policy, but he's faced a backlash for reigniting the Brexit debate. So I'm asking, as David Cameron says that Britain needs closer ties with the EU, do you agree? Well, let's see what my panel make of that. They've already introduced themselves. Broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy and also former Labour advisor Matthew Lauser.
I promise I'll behave.
Lizzie Cundy.
Oh, Lord David Cameron from Chipping Norton. He's back.
Did you watch the ceremony?
Do you know what the best thing about Chipping Norton is? There are 3 Labour councillors in Chipping Norton, so he's now Lord David Cameron of Red Chipping Norton.
Well, you know what? He's suave, intelligent.
Yes.
He doesn't, he's got that manner. He likes the world stage, but he was certainly one of our worst ever prime ministers, an utter failure who walked out on his country and didn't look back. And now Rishi, for some reason, has invited him back into the bosom of the cabinet. And why? 17.4 million voted against him in the referendum. Why the hell is Cameron back, trying to, slide back in and as Foreign Secretary, he decides to give millions of us, when we're all in the high cost of living, going through the toughest times, and now wants to get closer ties with the EU.
Well, in his defence, it is for defence in his head, so all the sort of international links. Matthew, what do you say?
I mean, the truth of the matter is, I think some of what he says is sensible, but either it's not going to happen, and also I don't think he's the man to say it. I mean, it really is as you say, the return of the dinosaur. I mean, those of us. I mean, I was a passionate Remainer. I accept the result, so we're not going to be rejoining the EU. Yeah. But those of us who were on the same side as Cameron, that sticks in my throat. The same side as Cameron in the referendum. We don't forgive him for running away and not staying in negotiating the deal and taking responsibility.
I mean,
so he doesn't keep anybody happy.
Well, which dinosaur would he be? Would he be the one with the scaly back?
I'm saying nothing. I don't want to get cancelled.
Let's not forget. I mean, he's going against our democratic rights. This is what we voted for, Brexit. It just, that's what the facts are. I'm sorry, David, whether you like it or not. And he actually spent $9 million on his own campaign to Remain of our money. How disgusting is that? Well, Mr. Remain, I'm sorry, you missed your chance. You flushed it down the toilet. Now stop sticking your nose back in. I'm sorry.
But I think
I really know.
It's a problem for the government, because remember, he was all about austerity. He was all about cuts and balancing the budget. Well, the government certainly isn't. We're borrowing, remaining very high. So I think it's sort of peculiar. It reminds us almost. It's sort of visual reminder every time you see Rishi next to him of how many of how many prime ministers. People are trying to work out, how many prime ministers ago was he? Every time
it's laughable. The whole thing is laughable. I mean, look, I don't understand why he's brought this person back, and it is laughable when I start thinking of the number of home secretaries, housing secretaries. Who else have we got? Justice ministers.
Yeah. Never mind the junior jobs. There's been hundreds of them.
I mean, it just becomes farcical. And then for him to actually bring somebody back who ran away when it came to the Brexit vote because he didn't get what he wanted. Let's face it.
But he was a coward. He was a coward.
It's not like he's bringing a whole new voter stream, is he?
But it just shows Rishi is a weak leader. He's not a leader. He's a forensic accountant, doesn't know what he's doing. And Cameron's in his ear the whole time. And it's very weird, with Keir Starmer. He's got Tony Blair in his ear. So we've got two prime ministers that are telling what the leaders to do. But I'm sorry, we should be focusing on maximising the benefits from leaving the EU. Not, and the EU, do you think they'd want us back anyway?
No. And I don't think they particularly listen to him, because this is the other thing, everybody in the EU, all the EU leaders, of course with Cameron, for being the person who called the referendum in the first place.
They're all laughing at him. They're all laughing.
He's literally keeping nobody happy, Rishi, by bringing...
I don't know what he was thinking. Some people say that because he's mature, he's had some experience, so he's got a level of gravitas. I mean, there are some benefits to somebody with a bit of experience. Yeah. I just can't forget...
Do you know what I think it is? I think it's because Rishi wants to have Rishi wants to sort of show the international stage that he's a big man, because we're waiting for his big job in Silicon Valley.
But he was a massive failure. He's showing the world stage. Yeah. He's the biggest failure we had as a Prime Minister.
Lizzie, I'm loving your passion
don't forget how he got involved with the Chinese. But, you know, all of that investment, I mean, that was...
Well, it's not just
the Green Deal, wasn't it?
It was Green Deal and his
telecoms and nuclear powers. I'm sorry, Cameron.
I suspect there's more to come on those because obviously the papers will have been keeping a little bit of powder dry on those. So
then after, he wrote a book that no one knew about. The only person that's happy for him to be in this government is his wife because he was sitting at home watching Place in the Sun every day.
He was in the
listen, this show's nothing without you and your views. So let's welcome our great British voices. Let's see what they have to say about this whole business with David Cameron. I've got Alan. How many have I got of you? I've got 4 of you, yes. I've got Alan Cook there. Let's start with you. Alan Cook, you're there in London. What do you think? David Cameron, he's back. Dinosaur. Ah!
Hi, Nana, and great show so far. Brilliant. Thank you for having me on again. Well, I think it's a fantastic appointment. It's driven so many people to join Reform UK away from the Tory party. So, yeah, thank you, Rishi, very much for that. It also cements their position of sliding towards the Liberal left, so we know exactly where they are. So it removes any doubt. But we do have an unelected Prime Minister. They're normally elected by the membership of the party. Yeah, appointing someone who's not even elected as an MP into the cabinet. You know, it's an affront to democracy. It shows, I think, really poor judgment on Rishi's side. So we have Cameron.
So, Alan, in a yes or no, is he right to say we need closer ties to the EU? Yes or no?
Absolutely not.
Right,
we need to remove these ties
it was
from
just
the
yes
EU.
or no. No, that was all.
Okay.
Brian Dugan in Solihull, what do you think?
Well, look, I mean, I think it's a storm in a teacup in terms of the immediate reaction, because all he has said is he suggested that perhaps we need to work more closely with Brussels on international defence policy. That strikes me as eminently sensible, probably more sensible than the decision he took to sort an internal party dispute and call a referendum several years ago. But listen, I don't think it's going to reignite any Brexit debate, except in the minds of those people who are still wrestling with what Brexit should be. And of course, everybody seems to be still wrestling with what Brexit should be. And as Lizzie points out, perhaps decisions need to be taken in terms of, well, what is Brexit, and get on with that, and forget about this thing that David Cameron is suddenly going to reignite a debate.
We know what Brexit is.
He's actually made a very sensible point for a change.
Well, we know what Brexit is. It's the idea is to loosen the ties from the EU, not closer. But yes, I suppose where it benefits us, it makes sense. But Jonathan Jones in Cornwall.
Yeah, only in trade, Nana. That's the only ties that should be stronger. I was very fortunate to go with David Cameron to China, pouring tea in a gigantic teapot. And if we stuck to trade, if he'd stuck to trade with China, we wouldn't be in the muddle about all this Chinese stuff. And same with Europe. Let's just stick to trade.
Yeah, everyone got tea.
Tea into it.
Yeah, everyone's got tea. Yeah. It's bad manners if you bring the cup up, then you don't drink. Thank you very much, Seshni.
Good afternoon, Nana. Great show. I love the talk on hirsutism and PCOS. But coming to David Cameron, no, I don't agree that we should get closer ties with EU. I think there's a lot of question marks and uncertainty as to what type of relationship does he want. And also, it goes against Brexit and what the majority of the country voted for. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty. I don't think that we should pursue this, and it needs further discussions.
Certainly, thank you very much. Very succinct. Oh, yeah, good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian Dugan in Solihull, Alan Cook in London, Jonathan Jones in Cornwall, and Seshni Mulia in Milton Keynes. Thank you so much. So those are voices, but what did you think? I've got to read some of these. Ken, what did you say? You were talking about, Ken says, dear Nana, thank you so much for inviting Hanan K to your show. Such a lovely young lady. She's beautiful, isn't she? And an important issue. Abby says, what a lovely girl. Having this condition is so difficult, as she described. I'm now retired, but I'm a homeopath for over 30 years and can tell you that I have treated women and girls with this imbalance pretty successfully, not as extreme, especially with the extent of the facial hair, but she might want to try it, so please pass on. Abby, I'll let her know. Thank you for that. Lots of people saying great things about the fabulous Hanan. I've got it now. But yes, I will read more. But moving on to this story, it caught my eye today. BBC have come under fire again, this time on its own staff, who have accused the broadcaster of double standards after being told not to attend the march against anti-Semitism. Meanwhile, some Jewish journalists say that protests against racism should not be viewed as a partisan issue. Let's see what my panel make of that. Broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy and also former Labour advisor Matthew Larser. Matthew, quickly, briefly.
Yeah, I mean, as a former BBC employer, like your good self, Nana, this seems sort of daft. I mean, they do manage to put their foot in at the BBC management, don't they? They really do manage to sort of make the wrong call on everything. I mean, I don't think the BBC's been disciplining people who've been on the Palestinian protest, if that, you know, and this is clearly very firmly decided on anti-Semitism. It's not about the conflict in the Middle East. It's particularly because members of the Jewish community are feeling unsafe. So it just seems a bit daft to me.
Lizzie Cundy.
Well, the BBC have a problem, and they've caused it themselves. Interesting how mouth of the day, Gary Lineker was allowed to spout off his views about Suella and the marches, and he's also just shared a video of Owen Jones accusing Israel of committing genocide. So how is it double standards, which is so very wrong? They have created a huge mess for themselves, and people are switching off by the droves.
Well, that's that. What do you think? But now it's time for the quickfire quiz, the part of the show where I test my panel on some of the other stories hitting the headlines right now. Joining me, broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy. Your buzzer, please, Lizzie. And also former Labour Party advisor Matthew Larser. Your buzzer. Please play along at home. Question 1. Doctor Who marked its anniversary this week. How old is the series? Is it A, 50, B, 60 or C, 70 years? I think that was Lizzie Cundy.
It was B, 60.
It was Lizzie Cundy.
Oh, sorry, I thought you said Matthew.
I've
been punished, haven't I?
Thank you very much.
Let me see. Well, you might be wrong. It was B, it's 60. I feel I should give you both the point for that. It's only fair, because there's confusion. But your name wasn't called Matthew, don't do it again.
I need
You're not
get me
called
hearing
Lizzie.
test.
Question 2. Americans celebrated Thanksgiving this week, but how many turkeys were pardoned in the White House ceremony this year? Was it A, 1, B, 2 or C, 3? Lizzie Cundy.
3.
3. Matthew Larser, press your buzzer.
2.
2. The answer is 2. It was 2 turkeys, Lizzie.
So confident. So confident.
I'm sitting next to 2 turkeys.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't just 1, it was 2.
It was both of me as well. Wallace and 2 turkeys named Liberty and Bell were pardoned from getting cooked. Oh, bless them. Question 3. On Monday, Joe Biden became the oldest US president in office. But who is the second oldest? Is it A, Donald Trump, B, Ronald Reagan or C, Franklin Roosevelt? I think that was you, Matthew Larser.
B, Ronald Reagan.
It is Ronald Reagan.
The answer is, of course, it's Ronald Reagan.
You see, do you remember Ronald Reagan?
I do, yeah.
I loved him, and he got on so well with Margaret Thatcher. I loved their relationship.
Sweet. Yeah, but
I remember Nancy as well. Nancy looked to the stars, didn't she?
Yeah. Question 4. Who was the highest paid athlete in 2023 so far? Was it Cristiano Ronaldo, Lionel Messi or C, LeBron James? I hadn't finished the answer to the question, so I have to give it Matthew.
Ronaldo.
You haven't answered, you haven't pressed your buzzer.
Ronaldo.
You didn't press your buzzer, you pressed before. Lizzie, you're going to be able to answer now.
Messi.
Messi, you think it's Ronaldo? The answer is... It's Ronaldo. He's right. He's right. You don't get that point because you pressed...
I think I've still won because I've got 3 out of 5.
No, you
hold on, there's another
got 3 out of 5. You did not get 3. Question 5. A GBNews reporter just won an RTS award. What is the reporter's name? I'm not going to say what they are. Just say the name. Lizzie Cundy.
A, Jack.
Jack Carson. What do you think?
Jack.
You think it's Jack Carson? The answer is Jack Carson. Yeah,
well done, Jack.
Wonderful.
Another award for GB News.
I know, I got an award as well. I can't remember what it's called.
I never win anything.
I'll let you know what it is. No, you didn't win that. No. You did. No, it's 2 awards.
We're joined. We'll be joined.
You'll be joined. Well, listen, some of you sent your messages in, so I'll read some because I had one here. Bill, this was about Hanan K. Is a very eloquent and interesting speaker, very informative and likeable. Well done. Julie says, in this crazy world, this beautiful young lady is an absolute inspiration. We love it.
Yeah.
And then on the case of Nigel, Ian says, I think Nigel will reach the last 2 and win 52% to 48%. 48, it's destiny. Like Brexit.
I'm telling you now, I'm not telling people to bet, but put a bet on Nigel. Honestly.
She's not telling you to bet,
but
so don't do it.
But do it.
Don't bet what you can't afford.
No.
Yes, well, listen, on today's show, I've been asking, is the hostage deal a major victory for Israel? And according to our Twitter poll, only 17% of you say yes. Yes, it is a good deal. The remainder, 83%, say no. I've got to say thank you so much to my panel, broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy. Lizzie, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And also former advisor to the Labour Party, Matthew Lala.
Thank you. I'll keep my arm in check next week.
Yeah, keep your arm in check. And I've just got a few more messages to read out because I just feel I should. John says the hostage deal is not a good victory for Hamas or Israel. It's a victory for the hostages. Thank you for
yes.
that.
Good point.
I wanted somebody to say
very well
that.
said.
And for the Qatari negotiators, pressure from their families forced Israel to compromise, and the Qataris proved themselves to be skilled diplomats. Thank goodness for that. Well, listen, thank you so much for all your messages. As ever, you can catch up with everything here on GB News. Download the GB News app if you don't already have it, or why not check us out on YouTube where you can stream the show live. Well, listen, joining me tomorrow is the fabulous Danny Kelly. He'll be giving us all the latest, plus Christine Hamilton. I've got some incredible guests you don't want to miss those. Plus, keep all the messages and texts coming through. gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet us at GBNews. On the way is the brilliant Neil Oliver. He's got some great treats for you. But as ever, keep it here on GB News. I'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place, 3 o'clock. Make sure you're there, be square. I'm off to have a pizza. Enjoy. See you tomorrow at 3. God bless.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. It is staying on the cold side as we move through the rest of the weekend, frost returning tonight, but we will have rain moving in from the Atlantic, and we can see that on the bigger picture. High pressure moves away as we head through into the second half of the weekend, replaced by low pressure bringing outbreaks of rain. Turning chilly this evening for many areas as skies clear, temperatures will tumble away. However, into the early hours, thicker cloud will move into the far west. Outbreaks of rain moving into parts of Northern Ireland. Some mist and fog patches ahead of the rain, and temperatures, well, towns and cities close to freezing, below freezing in the countryside. -4 or -5 Celsius is possible, but it means a sunny start with those fog patches still around first thing further north and east. Thicker cloud in the west, outbreaks of rain moving in, and this slowly pushing its way eastwards through the day. Best of the sunshine holding on across parts of Scotland, thicker cloud developing elsewhere, and the wind's just starting to increase across the far southwest as mild air approaches here, 11 or 12 Celsius, but elsewhere, cold day once more, 4 or 5 degrees at best. Into Monday, that low pressure is still around, giving outbreaks of showery rain across England and Wales in particular, some heavy bursts possible. Brighter skies for Northern Ireland and Scotland, but quite windy across some eastern coasts. And it stays unsettled as we move through this week with further outbreaks of rain.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, lovely people. Welcome along to Neil Oliver Live on GB News TV and on the wireless set. Tonight on the show, I'll be joined by Ralph Scholhammer to discuss what's currently been happening in the Dutch elections and how this may have a knock-on effect on us at home and how it will affect Europe and the wider world. I'll also be joined by Alex Story to discuss the current parlous state of democracy itself. And finally, towards the end, I'll be joined by the CEO of charity Restart Lives, which annually organises a sleep out to raise awareness about the conditions faced by London's rough sleepers and to raise the funds they need to keep up their vital work. All of that and plenty of conversation with my panellist, sociologist, commentator and author Frank Furedi. But first, an update on the latest news from Aaron.
It's 6 o'clock. Good evening to you. I am Aaron Armstrong. Hamas are delaying the second round of hostage releases until Israel commits to letting aid trucks enter northern Gaza. That's as reported by the Reuters news agency. Earlier, Hamas gave the Israeli government a list of 13 people that would be freed from captivity in Gaza, but it has now accused Israel of violating the terms of the truce agreement. Egyptian authorities have been waiting here. What you can see in your pictures is the Rafah border crossing. They are waiting for the hostages to arrive. Israel has agreed to release 39 Palestinian prisoners in exchange, prisoners held in this prison in the West Bank. That is part of the deal brokered by Qatar. It is the second of a 4-day pause in fighting, although the delay is taking place and it's not clear how long that will last. Meanwhile, a 4-year-old girl released yesterday after being held captive by Hamas told her father she dreamed of coming home. Raz Asher, her 2-year-old sister Aviv, and her mother Doron were reunited with Yoni Asher on Friday in the first stage of the Israel-Hamas deal. 24 hostages were released. A number of them were taken to the Schneider Children's Hospital. Authorities say they're responding well to treatment. The Director of Paediatrics, Gilad Livni, hopes all those being held by Hamas will be returned.
We're very exciting from the first moment. We saw the kids and their parents, the hugs and the crying, and it was very, very exciting for all of us. They are in good condition. And they are surrounded by our multidisciplinary teams, social workers, psychologists, nurses and doctors. They are surrounded by the family, friends.
Police have arrested 2 people on suspicion of supporting a proscribed terrorist organisation. Officers took the action as tens of thousands of people protested at a pro-Palestine march in central London. They say one suspect was seen in Trafalgar Square wearing a green headband with white Arabic script. He had several more in his possession. Another protester earlier was arrested on suspicion of inciting racial hatred. He was seen carrying a placard with Nazi symbols on it. Russia's hit Kyiv with the biggest drone attack of the conflict so far. That's according to Ukraine's Air Force. At least 5 people were injured when Shahed drones descended on the capital overnight. Explosions were heard across the city as they were intercepted, with buildings damaged in multiple districts. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has described these strikes as an act of willful terror. The former police officer convicted of murdering George Floyd has been stabbed at a prison in Arizona. That's according to reports in the US. It's understood Derek Chauvin survived the attack by another inmate on Friday, but has been seriously injured. It comes days after the Supreme Court rejected his appeal. The 47-year-old argued he hadn't received a fair trial. Mr. Chauvin is currently serving multiple sentences for George Floyd's death in 2020, which led to widespread protests against police brutality and racism. Well, tonight's expected to be the coldest night of the autumn season so far. Sub-zero temperatures across large parts of the country. It comes after many areas experienced their first frost of the year, with temperatures falling well below freezing. Across northwestern England and in the south, temperatures could dip to -7, while rural parts of Wales could get as low as -4. The Met Office says snow could fall next week. And London's traditional Christmas tree has been selected, and it stands at an impressive 62 feet tall. Norway's customary gift to the UK has been felled, and it will soon be on its way to the capital. It grew in forests just north of Oslo and will be loaded onto a ship bound for Britain. The tree will arrive in central London in next week, with the festive lights being switched on the 7th of December. The Norwegian spruce is sent every year as a token of thanks for Britain's support during the Second World War. Well, that's it for the moment from me. I'll be back with more a little bit later, but now it's over to Neil.
Children are stabbed in Dublin. Some Dubliners riot in protest at the horror. Fires burn in the city and windows are smashed. Garda Commissioner Drew Harris blames the damage on a complete lunatic faction driven by far-right ideology. Far-right, just so we're clear. He would say that, wouldn't he? Irish Justice Minister Helen McEntee looked at the fires and said, "A thuggish and manipulative element must not be allowed to use an appalling tragedy to wreak havoc. A manipulative